It's actually explicitly something from the eminent metaphysics that beauty is more fundamental than truth and goodness. So truth would be like the masculine aspect and goodness more the feminine, more thought, more feeling. And beauty is kind of the grounding thing from which they kind of co-emerge in a sense.
David, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. You're the first guest on my new show, 0 to 1. So welcome to the show. And I'm honored to have you as my first guest. The show deals with the future of humanity and how we're getting to a better one than the one that might anticipate us if we don't start behaving. And I think your work aligns really well with the theme and the project. And I found your video online. Well, actually, it was sent by a friend of mine, by David Carter, who also happens to be my partner. And I was immediately, as I'm sure many, was hooked on the way that you think and your illustrations. And I immediately thought this would be a great idea to basically bring you to the show and have a little bit of a discussion about your work and what you represent. So before we jump into like the really heavier and deeper things, I know you told me a lot about it off camera, but I would love if you can kind of recapitulate for the audience of who you are exactly, how you started, and what brought you to the position of doing what you're doing today.
Yeah. So I like to kind of start to tell the story always with a kind of very important event in my early childhood, which was the divorce of my parents. Nothing too unique nowadays, but it was definitely a very big event for me, and this sensitized me early on to kind of the pains of social fragmentation that was occurring right at the center of my family field. And it was just a personal thing in the beginning. But then years later, throughout my adolescence, these initial rifts that were created in my family field basically became surface area for all the craziness of the kind of culture war and these increasingly polarizing political topics to land in, and basically fracture my family field into more and more of a multipolar mess. So it started with like refugee crisis in 2015. It was very notably for me the starting point of a new chapter of this fragmentation occurring, and then it just ramped up from there onwards. Brexit, Trump, COVID, and everything else you could name. Me too.
So can you just because I don't want to brush over it too quickly, because I do want to, because when you just say, for example, the migrant crisis, it doesn't really give us a good understanding of what was it about it that was part of your fragmentation. So what specifically about the migrant crisis contributed to your inner fragmentation?
Yeah, so basically after the divorce, my mom became my primary caretaker, and it just happened to play out that way that my mom landed in that part of society that was disagreeing with the mainstream narrative to what the drivers of the crisis were, how to address it, how to deal with it, and in which direction we should collectively steer. And most, if not all of, my remaining relationships were more kind of mainstream aligned. And especially, just also my environment in school, like basically everyone else, mostly that I was talking to about this, was very clear in that, that this is a very simple thing. We know why it happens. We know how to resolve it. And a key part of how we resolve it is to kind of silence all of these idiots that don't understand that they're racist, they're afraid, they're stupid, whatever. There were all of these kind of hand-wavy arguments why there is no problem here. It's clear. And I really tried, to take that kind of pseudo solution, because I just wanted, it was very confusing for me. But yeah, it didn't work. I couldn't frame my mother as a stupid racist. It just doesn't work if this is your primary caretaker. And I just love my mom and everyone else in my family. And so that was just a very confusing period in my life. And as I said, it didn't really stop, but I kind of learned to deal with that and learned to kind of relate to that. In a way where I needed to learn to hold these conflicting perspectives, these kind of straw mans that people were telling about each other, which is something that was kind of, the seed was planted early on when it was just a personal thing, because how things are after divorce, you don't necessarily have the most positive picture of the other. So I had to kind of navigate that, but that wasn't political, that was just personal. But then it started to get political, but I was already, like, I saw the same pattern. So basically that forced me to get really good at a state of mind, which I later came to refer to as liminality. So like the liminal mind, that basically is able to hold conflicting perspectives without collapsing reality to any of them, and just hold space for them and be kind of curious, like open-minded and open-hearted about how does this resolve, or just not accepting these pseudo solutions, which are not real solutions. And the open-heartedness, actually, like, maybe we can get more into that later, is actually a key aspect of that, because I'm sure there were many topics prior to that where I didn't know anyone in my immediate surrounding that would take any given perspective that might seem outlandish. So and when I didn't have anyone in my immediate field that I would cut off from myself, I would gladly accept this pseudo solution and be like, oh yeah, no, these people that I've never met, never spoken to, don't care about, no, they are just stupid or whatever. But yeah, once you're trying to do that with like your closest family members, you realize, wait, something's not working here. And so actually the open-heartedness and like not closing my heart to people comes first. And then my mind is curious, like, okay, this is strange. Like, I know this is a good person. How do I make sense of this total conflict in worldviews? And so basically this kind of primed me throughout my adolescence. It didn't yield to anything concrete. I was just a bit confused and tried to ignore that. Then I went to study physics at Heidelberg University, because the type of mind that I have is kind of naturally drawn to this analytical thinking and trying to see the deep patterns behind things. And that was, very helpful in one respect, but on the other hand, it didn't connect at all to the actual challenges that were most meaningful in my life. But it was, as I said, very useful to kind of hone my reasoning skills and stuff like that. And then towards the end of my bachelor, during the lockdowns and COVID, where there was just a whole nother level of this fragmentation going on in my family field. I was kind of freaking out. There I discovered this beautiful system thinkers movement called GameB, and then just adjacent movements, and started hopping around from kind of thought leader to thought leader, hopping around the podcast landscape, and just learning these very, deep patterns underlying, like driving all of these crazy things happening around me, most notably in my kind of social field. That was just really helpful. One key piece that I got from that was a thing called the Hegelian dialectic, or like dialectical thinking, which is just this analogy with the cylinder that looks like a circle from one side, like a square from the other side, but really it's just a cylinder. And so it's possible to have like incredibly convincing illusory arguments about the nature of reality, and basically be convinced that you're right because you actually see the circle, and that the other person must be wrong, but actually you're just misunderstanding the nature of what you're supposed to do. Like your two eyes, it's as ridiculous as your two eyes fighting over which of the perspectives is right. They're supposed to work together and trust and integrate, and then you get depth perception. And that was the key piece for me, to see that this was broken, in my family and in society at large. And that was just a huge breakthrough for me, because suddenly, geometry and that kind of logical reasoning, logical thinking connected to the failures of communication that were actually driving all of these confusing phenomena in my family. And that was a key piece where and then learning about, from the same thinkers in the GameB movement, learning about how social media algorithms are like a key driver to this whole fragmentary dynamic. And again, what I said earlier, this state of mind of liminality, which I think is actually has to precede this dialectical thinking. Like you can't authentically engage in dialectical thinking and searching for the cylinder if you don't get comfortable with not knowing. So you have to be able to say, I don't know, but I care, and hold that and kind of sit with that discomfort. And then when you're able to do that, magic can happen in that space. And so that just motivated me, in learning just about the crazy mess that the world at large is in. That just motivated me, a lot to contribute to this GameB movement, but in general, like just everyone trying to,
to the what
heal
movement?
humanity.
Sorry? What is the movement?
GameB movement.
Oh,
I could quickly explain.
Yeah, please.
GameB, yeah. The label, the name kind of implies that there is something like Game A, and that would just be the system that we're living in right now, the exponential extraction machine that doesn't have any breaks built in. And it's just there's an endless supply of just brilliant frames and thinking in the GameB movement describing why Game A is broken and why it can't be fixed with the toolkit that built it. Kind of this Einstein quote, or a corollary to that is like you cannot solve a problem with the same type of thinking that created it. And so the level of transformation that's actually required to shift to whatever the alternative will be, as you outlined in the intro of this podcast, GameB or whatever you want to call it, that actually requires such a deep transformation that almost like just a tiny amount of humanity right now is aware of how deep that transformation has to be. I think it's changing exponentially, the awareness of how deeply we have to realign. But all that kind of came together. There's one more key piece that was through my studies, I was forced to learn just the basics of Python, like just programming, and I had to work with GitHub, which many might be familiar with here as an open source kind of software sharing platform. Just learning the basics of that just blew me away of how refined that system is. And, it's decades old. I hope I'm right about that, but it's like many years old. Pretty much everyone is using it that is trying to develop open source software. In the GameB movement, there were very clear frames about, there was a very clear insight that GameB, whatever it may look like, has to be anti-rivalrous. That means it increases when it's shared. It doesn't decrease. Like it's not like a rivalrous game, like a zero-sum game. It needs to be something where the more you share, the more there is, kind of thing. So like a language. The more people speak a language, the more valuable it gets. Not something that you try to monopolize, then it actually vanishes. That it doesn't have any reality if it's not shared. So that infrastructure that's already existing, the open source ecosystem, just stood out to me. And around the same time, maybe a bit later, I listened to an audiobook called Sand Talk by an indigenous scholar called Tyson Juncker, who did something, if I understood correctly, no one before him has done at that point, which is basically instead of looking at instead of looking at indigenous culture through a Western lens, he would turn it around and look at Western culture through an indigenous lens. And that was super interesting, hitting back on the point, how deep does the transformation have to be? Like, because our type of mind is very different from the kind of indigenous type of mind. And there, the key was that sand talk is actually an indigenous practice that the Aborigines do to this day, where you have a conversation, but you draw symbols in the sand while you communicate, to actually augment and like enrich the communication. And you can basically infuse knowledge into the symbols. A perfect example would be the yin yang symbol from Taoism. It's just infinitely more effective to communicate the idea of polarity and like duality and contrast and all of that stuff with that symbol, with the help of that symbol, than just using words. And kind of all of these things came together, where I was like, okay, we could use actually the open source infrastructure and kind of use it to create these symbols that we then can use to enrich our communication and try to build all of these cylinders, find and build these cylinders in such a way that we don't need a centralized authority, because that's one of the other failure modes of GameB, kind of the addiction to authority. So yeah, and that's kind of the search for that. And or like my life mission of trying to just heal the human family, basically, like heal the fragmentation that has plagued our species. That is what I call Project Liminality. That's like the banner. Like, this is the ongoing exploration there. And then the concrete digital communication medium that I'm exploring, or that I'm building right now, actually, that's what I call the InterBrain. And that was the video. That is what the video was about that you saw. So yeah, I stop here, I think.
That's a really good summation. Thank you so much. It's a very it gives me a lot to work with here. There's so many elements here that I connect with and I want to explore. One of them is the being that Sand Talk basically shows that there's something about the visual field that is a lot more than people realize. There's something about seeing things that is not quite the same as any other sense. Some people would insist that there's most of the truth is in the somatic experience, for example. That's a very Buddhistic approach to it. Like it's in your body. It's whatever you can sense in your body. To me, I don't know why, but it was always clear that there's something about the visual field that almost like lends itself to the optimal communication, at least in our level of emergence in this universe. There's something about the ability to instantiate meaning in a visual form that can communicate instantly, almost infinitely more than by fragmenting it to separate audible symbols, so words, or even in writing, which are visual symbols, but they're fragmented visual symbols. They you have to recollect them versus a unitary observation of something that communicates itself. So I would love to explore that, but first, let me go back a little bit. We'll go step by step from everything that you said, and then we can kind of proceed from there. For the sake of clarity, because your work, just to make it clear to everybody, mostly revolves around the unification and transcending binary perspectives. But just for clarity's sake, just so I understand kind of like how the pawns were arranged when you arrived at this, when you started becoming who you are today, when you said that you threw some words that were pretty vague, because you said things like mainstream. And what I'm discovering more and more is that actually I'm not really sure there's such a thing, because my perspective, for example, according to my life's experiences, can seem to me like the minority, because what the algorithms would feed me is all the things that would trigger me, because they would put it will almost make me feel like my position is in the minority. And I'm pretty sure it does the same thing to the other side as well, or any other side that perceives things in any other way. So I'm not sure what mainstream really meant. And I just want to nail down that one point, because I want to see that with clarity. So when everything has to do with, like, for example, with the migration crisis, when you said mainstream, you mean in the sense that people said there's no problem here? Is that what you meant by mainstream? And your mom disagreed with it, and then you correct me where I got it wrong, and then you felt kind of like more like the mainstream, but you said, but I can't look at my mom like she's crazy, So is there something else here? Was that kind of the situation, or I got it wrong?
Yeah, no, thank you for double clicking on that. So I think a better word than mainstream would be what Eric Weinstein refers to as the gated institutional narrative. So that's more what I'm referring to, that the institutions tend to all fall into a similar cluster. Very, like, almost no time do you see big institutions disagreeing publicly. And, you know, it's an interesting journey to explore what the reason for that is. You know, is there, you know, of course, there's a pedagogical component to it. You don't, like, strong leaders tend to stand on the stage with clarity, right? You don't want to frighten people that don't have all of the information and like disagreeing publicly and stuff like that. But yeah, it's more like there was a clear institutional consensus, which is broadcast through state-sponsored media. And that is very tangibly what most people in my surrounding were aligning with. And in that narrative, it was a very simple, almost cartoonish picture, like reducing the geopolitical complexity and, you know, everything that plays into that dynamic to, yeah, just something that you can basically put in a 5-minute segment on evening news and repeat again and again. And simple phrases, like there was we can do it, basically was the slogan. And so what is we? What is it? Like, you know, kind of that stuff. Yeah. So I hope that does that help?
Yeah, it helps a lot. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because there's also, it's further complicated by the fact that I think European consensus might be a little bit different than American consensus, and it just keeps going, right? And that's really the central point of your work. So there's always this ever-evolving front between the two camps that you're outlining as order and chaos. Order and so chaos is the metastasides version of what was the other one? So there's people,
freedom and order.
Freedom and order
drive
right.
Chaos and oppression when they become integrate.
Yeah, well, when they become extreme versions of themselves, and if they're not integrated, they're bound to become the extreme versions of themselves.
Yeah.
And we'll get into this a lot more in detail, but I just want to outline this and see what you think about this. So actually, maybe this is a good idea to maybe flesh it out like shortly. So give us this thing, and then I'll ask my question after you give us this dichotomy observation and what you believe needs to arise from it.
Right. Yeah, so that is basically the intro of that video that you discovered, and I just want to be clear that this framing came out of the, you know, GameB and like came out of this network of thinkers that I discovered through GameB. Key people in that movement have condensed, kind of try to simplify without diluting the essence of what kind of we need to. The challenge we need to kind of overcome here. So basically, the search for the third attractor is a highly condensed framing for kind of what the essence is that our species, the challenge of what our species is facing right now. And so just to unpack that framework, the GameB movement is very much characterized by the, you know, key thinkers that have like the early adopters, I would say, or popularizers, that is a word, of complexity theory, which is a different, it's a kind of a novel kind of science. It's very scientific, but it is basically looking, rather than looking at the dancers, which we've been doing for, you know, super long in the West, like just looking at the fundamental particles and like trying to identify the individual pieces out of which things are made. Complexity theory completely abstracts that away and just looks at the dance itself. And you can there are phenomenal insights that can be derived from that shift in perspective. And so in complexity theory, you can basically look at highly complex systems and basically say, I could never know all the details, but I can identify so-called attractors, or basins of attractions, which means...
So is it the same as chaos theory in mathematics? The same idea?
It's very related. Yeah, very. I wouldn't know exactly how it connects, but definitely.
It's literally what you it's literally what you just said.
Okay, then
they're even called attractors, so they're called strange attractors in chaos.
Exactly, yeah, strange attractors. Okay, so yeah, the same language there. So yeah, the idea is that you don't need to know exactly how all the individual details of how a ball rolls into a valley. If you know the shape of the valley, you know where it will land at the end of the day. So that's kind of the abstraction here. We can just look at these basins of attraction instead of all the details we could never track. And so the fundamental kind of two attractors, two pathological attractors that we are kind of oscillating between right now are based in two foundational values. And this is a bit of my own phrasing here, but I see the two foundational values that people are trying to defend against other groups that they perceive as threatening those are the values of freedom and order. And it just happens that some of us are more drawn to the order that would perhaps map a bit to the conservative archetype, and others are more towards freedom. Well, I'm not even sure if there's a good mapping here, but some people are more attracted to freedom and some more to order.
I think you're right, by the way. Yeah, it's like the more liberal, artistic type. They always want the more of the. I just want to float free. I want to explore. I want to open. And then conservatives a lot more. I want structure. I want maybe not rigidity, but I want security within bounds.
Exactly. Yeah, I was just tripping up there because then there's this freedom-loving American with the machine guns. And it's like there's this other archetype that is less
against
progressive.
What they feel as oppression, though. So the perception is
right.
they see the oppression in the other side in a different way, which directly connects to your work. But I think it's the same. It's the same.
All right. Yeah. So, but basically downstream of that, like after this initial misunderstanding that there is any problem here between any conflict between these values, kind of if you simplistically think it's either freedom or order, we can't have both. Downstream of that, you will have more and more polarization happening, and basically those that only side with freedom and think all order is oppression, basically are the agents of chaos, become agents of chaos. And those that only side with order and think all freedom is dangerous, they become agents of oppression, basically. They applaud the totalitarian regime kind of emerging, and others applaud the downfall of our civilization. And it's both it's equally uninteresting, at least to me.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you in the middle, but this is too good of a point to go to, just to illustrate how, for me, the yin yang really communicates this perfectly, because for some reason, not very often, the smaller circles are noticed. And to me, what you just said is exactly that, which is that when you try to go to the extreme version of one of them, you become the ultimate version of the other one. So the more you try to go towards ultimate freedom, you end up being the ultimate oppressor, and vice versa. When you try to do too much order, it becomes chaotic, because the system just kind of almost responds back. So you have these little circles. That's what they represent for me. But please continue.
Mm-hmm. Interesting point. Yeah. But basically, so this is already a huge waste of time, basically, that we're engaged in for most of human history, where you just have basically people are afraid of chaos, so they they swing to the oppression side, and then people are afraid of oppression, they swing to the chaos side. So that's just happening. But now you throw exponential technology into the mix, and this whole thing becomes much more critical, because it's one thing if you fight with swords about freedom or order. It's another thing if you use thermonuclear weapons. And so basically, ever since our relationship to technology is key. Like in the GameB movement, and just many thinkers have discovered that it's not a trivial thing that we are technology building monkeys, kind of like that, like because technology helps us to build better technology. Like AI is the cleanest example of that, where actually it's getting extreme, like ridiculous, the feedback loop of how that type of technology accelerates itself. So we basically, from the beginning of us engaging with that relationship, we basically started a journey on an exponential curve, which, as you probably know very well, it looks like, basically a constant, like zero, almost no technology for like most of the time that we were on this planet. Then it looks a bit like a linear thing at some point, and then, more parabolic. And at some point you're like, wait a minute, this is actually exponential. So it just goes vertical at some point. And we have very bad intuitions. Evolution, like there was no evolutionary incentive to really get good intuitions about these exponential escalatory paths, because that doesn't occur in nature. So our intuitions are wildly off for like the moment that we're in right now, and how consequential actually that relationship is. And since we don't have brakes built into GameA, GameA can't help itself but just accelerate towards that cliff, which if we're stuck in that framing, is either we're gonna basically destroy ourselves and dissolve into chaos, or we will solve the problem of chaos by creating this complete technocratic dystopian nightmare, like the perfected social machine that, I don't know, controls every cell of your body perfectly and every cell of every living creature on Earth, so that we make sure that no one ever does a terrorist attack or something like that. So yeah, that's basically the problem statement in a nutshell. These two pathological attractors are kind of what we're left with, as long as we are in the state of fragmentation, as long as we do that silly thing where we think it's either or. And so, but what is open, like a pathway that's open to us when we mature and basically realize that we're meant to transcend this, then there is a placeholder term called the third attractor. Again, like call it GameB, call it whatever you want. But this is a reality. We can actually overcome this type of mind that can't help itself but always think in these boxes. And we have to. And that's key to what I'm exploring with my work.
Thank you. So now I get to ask my question on top of this, which is, there is this moment. One of the things I really appreciate about everything that you do in this frame in general is that I identify this ability to hold opposing positions truly, without truly marrying yourself to either one of them, as it is the golden rule, it is the golden ability to carry us into the 21st century and beyond, the way that I see it. The problem that I'm identifying is that very often people pay lip service to it, but they don't realize and don't admit that they actually are not doing that. They're still married to a position, and now they just said this thing on top of it, and now they get to get away with whatever. But they don't actually internally, they don't actually hold both views. Clearly they don't, because they get triggered the second you say the other thing. And the second somebody gets triggered, there's no way they're holding both positions in mind, at least not in a balanced way. So my question to you is, there's this very, what I was previously referring to as the evolving front between two, not the opposing forces you're talking about, well, at least not in the way that I view it, but it is between the ideal and the practical, right? I'm now the lucky inhabitor of an age in which I'm transitioning. I'm seeing transitions from one to the other, and as someone who always deeply analyzes everything around me and inside of me, it's a very interesting experience for me, because there's a certain point in I think everybody's life, that the young wind that constantly wants to thrust forward all of a sudden gets hit with enough wind from the other end, and it goes, wait a second, is there an easier path? Is there a more practical path right now to achieve what I think that should happen in the future? What are the current steps that I want to take? So it's almost like with the younger mind, you're always looking out there, and what you can't understand is how come all these adults just won't go there? Like, here's the goal. Why can't we just go there? And it's only when you mature enough, or maybe mature is the wrong word, but maybe when you live enough through this life, you start understanding. You go, oh, I see. I thought it was just going from A to B. I didn't realize there's all these stops along the way to constantly try to sabotage the thing. And there's always the difference between what I think the optimal outcome should be and what needs to happen now for potentially bringing it into the future. Because if you take a stride that is too wide, you might actually exhaust the system and never get there. So this kind of, it's like the joking way of saying it is like, if you're not a liberal in your 20s, you're heartless. If you're not a conservative in your 40s, you're brainless, right? So it's interesting because I'm experiencing it for real. Like, I'm all of a sudden seeing the position that previously I was like, huh. So for example, we have it's kind of perfect because this little anecdote encapsulates a lot of the caricatures in real life. So I have, he now passed away. It was a wonderful family friend. It was I was born in Russia. I grew up in Israel, and in Israel, I was actually friends with some Arabs, and one of these Arabs that I grew up with, a really good friend of mine, Rami. And his uncle, obviously a Muslim, right? And he was always kind of like the center of attention in terms of like all the celebrations. He would always invite everybody. Like, he's the one that would always do the whatever holiday it is, dinner, and everybody would come, and he would invite family and friends. He was that kind of a guy. What was extra interesting is that he was both a political scientist and there you go. And a conservative. So it was like this interesting mixture, and he was a very open-minded and very open-hearted person. He was a wonderful, wonderful man. As a good liberal, I would always, we would always kind of like get into these like very, very good heart, like, well-intentioned kind of conversations with full awareness that, of course, he knows a lot more about all these topics that I'm talking about because he's literally a political scientist, right? So he teaches this stuff. But he's also one of these kind of like, not one of these telling you how it is, but teaching you how to think kind of professors. And we used to talk about Jon Stewart. And I obviously, like everybody, I love Jon Stewart. Like, he's hilarious, he's brilliant, and he aligned with basically everything I believed politically, right? So it was like a perfect package for me. And we would always talk about him. And he loved watching him. But he basically disagreed on every single thing with him. But he just loved the comedy. He just loved And every time we would get into this, like, these topics through talking about what Jon Stewart said. And I would say things like, come on, like, I don't even remember what the subjects were, but like, it doesn't really matter. But it would be so clear to me that, come on, man, how can you not see? And he's like, well, and then he would kind of go with me, like, he would take me back and would like explain how things actually really supposed to work, what the Constitution actually says, where the little comedic twist actually gives it a completely different flavor, and it doesn't really communicate what it really is, right? Mm-hmm. And I would always I would listen, but I could not, for the life of me, I could not see the point though. Like, I just kept on. And now when I'm getting a little older, I'm starting to see it, and I go, wow. So what I derive from it currently is that it's not so much about the information, it's about the attitude you carry prior to entertaining the information. And that attitude is the thing that I think always has to guide every single moment of engagement with both reality and other people, because it's the thing that determines, how you go about both communicating what you believe, doing what you do, and also dreaming what you want for the future. So all of this was just an exposition to give you a sense of where I'm asking the question from. The question is, holding all of this in view, I agree with every single thing you say about the, everything the Project B kind of proposed to try and teach us about the world and how we can potentially live in it. But is there no central point where the possibilities collapse into action, and then you kind of just by the sheer fact that now you have to take action, you have to land on something. You have to take a position on something, right? So how does that fit within this frame? Because you want to hold as many views as possible, but then when it comes time to act, let's say there's an investment that has to go towards something very large in the country that will take away from other subjects. You are taking a big position there, right? And somebody has to make that decision. Even if we will unfold into, as Charles Eisenstein very beautifully outlines in his book, A More Beautiful World Our Hearts Know is Possible. Even if we are moving towards this world that is much more holistic and connected, both in terms of humans and like, imagine the biggest paradise that Charles would want to see. Even there, you would still have, political decisions where, you're influencing big things and you have to kind of agree, or how you aggregate funds, and or maybe you're even thinking in terms of just like eliminating funds. But I'll let you address this. So like what does that look like in your model when you actually have to take a position because of an action that you have to?
Yeah. Beautiful question. Super important. So let me try to connect a few things here that I don't think I have connected like that before. But basically, one frame that I find very helpful from the GameB world is that there are the 3 horizons called triage, transition, transformation. And so right now, it's extremely important not to blow ourselves up. And there are people that are basically every waking hour of their life is dedicated to preventing us blowing ourselves up. And we should be so grateful for all of these people because they enable us, those of us that are drawn to the transition or transformation horizon, to do that. Without people preventing Armageddon, this wouldn't be possible. Transition is, okay, let's take what we have, and not in an emergency kind of way of thinking. Well, we'll take what we have. What is the next step that we can take? So we have a somewhat institutionalized schooling system that has all of these flaws, but it also has some, we are dependent on some key aspects of it. How can we just take it and make it, a bit less toxic, a bit more healthy? That's like the second horizon. And then the transformation one is that one that, the type of young mind that you were alluding to, that wants to think all the way, that's where this type of mind would be pull towards. And that is literally like, okay, how can we completely rethink this whole thing? And that's more or less, that's where I'm drawn to, by and large. The kind of transition, transformation, these 2 horizons speak most to me. But yeah, in terms of, so sense making is a key aspect of navigating reality, and especially this very hectic time that we are living in. But sense making is only valuable to the degree that it informs choice making, because at the end of the day, choice is like, there's a very deep metaphysical framework from one of the key players in the GameB movement called Forrest Landry. He discovered this thing called the immanent metaphysics, which I'm a huge fan of, which basically takes what we were referring to earlier, like the yin yang, this duality, and turns it into a trinity, like a formal system that is based on kind of yin yang and their dance. So just a little side note there, but one key insight from his metaphysics is that we tend to think, okay, we are selves that make choices. And he would actually say, no, it's the other way around. It's not that self has choice, but choice has self. So literally, like, choice in this framework, at least, is at the very core of what we are. And there's, choice happens across all levels of this complex system, like individual, family, all the way to species. And so, yeah, you need to kind of address how does sense making translate to choice making. And there's a kind of metaphor here that I think actually you're the perfect person to to bring this up with, because it's about quantum computing, actually. And I see basically, it's not perfect, but it's pretty decent, that you can compare the GameB type of mind, which I like to call domesticated mind, as Tyson Juncker-Purta calls it in his book Sandtalk. That type of mind is a bit like a classical computer, meaning it cannot stand uncertainty. Uncertainty is risk. Uncertainty is danger. Uncertainty needs to be brought to certainty, which often is not possible, but then you just, do this pseudo thing where you're like, no. Like all these people are just racist assholes. And that's how I resolve it, and everything is certain again. So yeah, that you can run a society like that. It will be full of unnecessary conflict and more become a nightmare. But you can build like this social machine with that type of mind that just, whoever wins the conflict, that's now the certain reality. On the other side, the other type of mind, this new and ancient type of mind that I'm exploring, that I think will proliferate on this planet in the near future very much, is what I call liminal mind. And that mind actually views uncertainty as potential. So instead of saying, oh, there are so many things I don't know, what could go wrong? It just says, oh, there are so many things I don't know. What a beautiful surprise could just happen right now. Like I have no clue, like something extremely beautiful could just happen, and I don't have any control over that, and it's a beautiful thing. And that type of mind is very much more akin to quantum computing. So just for the audience, the difference, the basic level entry point for quantum computing is always that you have a classical bit in a classical computer that is just binary digit bit between 0 and 1. So it's either 1 or 0. In a quantum computer, the foundational building block is a quantum bit or qubit. And that basically can have a superposition. So there's just a probability distribution that describes the state until you measure it. And a quantum computer only becomes really a quantum computer when you take multiple qubits and you kind of entangle them together, and then you have that can become a super complex quantum state, and you can do kind of magical things with that. But when you run Shor's algorithm, for example, at some point after letting it run in this kind of quantum soup type of state, at some point you measure and it collapses to the right answer, or you measure many times, and then it's very unlikely that it doesn't always collapse to the right answer. So, but this is for me like the perfect analogy for how society kind of needs to change, or the advantage that whoever the first group or the first kind of spearhead of humanity that manages this new mode will obtain. So basically, concretely, what that means is instead of collapsing reality to any kind of explicit determined state all the time. So you, for example, I don't know, refugees welcome or refugees out. Like you're either or. Like if that is your idea, and then apply this to all different dimensions of the problem that you're describing. You're always like, is it black or white? If you're addicted to that, you will not get far, and you will be like helpless and easily manipulated as well.
That's a key component that I would love to double click on later.
Yeah, it's super important. The liminal mind just looks at all of this information, as we talked earlier. You hold the superposition, basically. And there's another aspect that I would love to inject here, which is finding the cylinder. There are these lip service type of things you can do, as you mentioned earlier, where you miss the point. So if you say, okay, I have a square here and a circle here. So I don't know, refugees welcome, refugees out, or something like that. So let me hold the superposition and find the synthesis, and you just say, oh, it must be a rounded rectangle. You know, you smear it kind of together, and it's both, something like that.
In reality, it depends, right? It depends on the state of the state. It depends on can you absorb them and in what like it depends on a lot of different factors that might change in every given moment, which is the reality of things.
Yeah. The whole thing is alive. Yeah, you have to deal with that. But yeah, like a rounded rectangle. Actually, you move away from the cylinder because the cylinder includes a circle and it includes a square, but it does not include a rounded rectangle. Like no slice of the cylinder will give you that shape. So actually, you removed yourself further away from reality, trying to pay lip service to, oh yeah, it's both. Or you can say, oh, we have to hold paradox. It's kind of both and neither at the same time. And you can do these things where you kind of turn off your mind. And there are situations where this is very helpful. And it's a great skill that if you can do that. But you should not lose interest in actually finding this actual thing that you can find, like the cylinder that actually resolves the conflict, the seeming conflict. Yeah, and so if you think about it, like Liminal Mind kind of looks at all of these complex perspectives, and you hold it at the same time. At some point, you might be forced to make a decision, you know, and I would say that is then kind of collapsing the wave function. At some point, you just have to hope, or I don't know, you know, use everything available to you. Ask a higher power if that's your thing. Use your gut, follow your heart, use all of the sense making that you have. Like you have to collapse the wave function. But you should only ever do that when it's actually necessary. That's kind of how that's what I do. That's all I can say. So if it's like, okay, do you inject something into your body or not? You have to make a decision, right? And so for me, what I discovered is, you know, for my particular path, it's the most valuable thing I can do is to basically every choice I make have this kind of transcendent reference point that I'm trying to reduce the frequency with which I have to make have to collapse the wave function. And so, yeah, not super refined. This is a bit kind of thought in progress, but I like to call it a kind of liminal action. So it's like, okay, you can do things that are helpful and beneficial no matter where the wave function collapse lands. So you could, for example, let's put the budget of nation states on a blockchain. So it's transparent and incorruptible. It's actually not relevant if the whole thing is maximally corrupt and evil, or if it's kind of pretty much working the way it presents itself. It doesn't matter. It's an improvement. And so this is the type of, where you get practical, but you always try to find this path that you look for it and hope to find it, a path, a choice that doesn't force you to basically take an extremist side and collapse the wave function if it's not super necessary. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, so let me just recapitulate to make sure that I am tracking. So basically you're saying that there is this natural flow to things, and we, as what we call agents, are somewhere, somehow part of that flow, including all the choices, what we call choices we make, or the way the choices make us. I love that, by the way. And then the way that you're suggesting that we make decisions in this new paradigm is not through what we want constantly in every single moment. We kind of allow possibilities to unfold, and to the extent that we can, we just kind of ride the wave until there's a clear moment where it's almost like, the way that I viewed it, it's almost like you're on stage with a really famous singer, and they brought you on stage to kind of sing a few lines with them, and they do the thing. They are the show. They do most of the show. You're there to kind of participate a little bit because you were given that wonderful opportunity, and then they would sing, and then they would pause and put the mic to your mouth, and clearly now you have to say something or to sing something. Right. So it's almost like you wait for these moments where life goes, and what would you like? And then you go, okay, that's my turn. And then you kind of go. But until that moment, you kind of flow with the thing. So it becomes more of you becoming part of the organic unfoldment versus you constantly intervening and trying to sing your lines while the singer is trying to sing his song and ruining the show, basically. Would that closely relate to? Okay.
Yeah, that's the same thing.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I love that. And the more you talk about it, the more I realize that that's basically the process that I've been on with the way that I'm kind of evolving as a person. It's very similar to that, which is that I'm trying to follow, I just call it the way of the Tao. I try my best to just kind of follow the flow. You know, people would very often ask me, okay, what are you planning next? I have some general ideas, but I don't want to say, because I know that the second I'm going to say, I'm going to commit to something. I don't necessarily need it to go there. It's just kind of a thing that floats in my head. But if something new comes and surprises me, I'm very happy with it. In fact, I'm more happy because now it gives me the opportunity to basically live something that I didn't anticipate, which is thrilling and exciting. And also, I get to view reality from another perspective that became available to me because I quieted myself enough to not demand something that I think I want. I allow reality to kind of like deliver the goods in a way that I could never anticipate. And I think that's a much more exciting way to be. The question for me is, how do we encourage more of that? Is it just, obviously it's a multifaceted problem, but the ways that you have identified. So one way in which you're doing it obviously got me hooked, is communicating visually and clearly, in a very methodical way that is also alive, and I'm huge on that. Like there's nothing I can talk about more than the unification between the left and right hemisphere of humanity versus like it's not a competition between the cerebral and the somatic. They're actually one and the same system that is trying to emerge together, and so that's why I always find beauty in technical thinking that is inspired by the realness of the moment versus just kind of like, you know, just the clicky facts kind of thing, you know?
Right.
And so yeah, what aside from the obvious, because you communicating in this beautiful way, clearly, and also through the visual, what other ways you think we can take societally to encourage more of that? One that I can think of is obviously just exhibit more of that, so it becomes more infectious, right? But then on a scale, is this something that you already envision to some degree? This is something that plan B plan B is different. Is it something that GameB suggests? That's the opposite. GameB suggests that we should do, which is like form these cliques or societies. Or how does that look like in your model?
Yeah, interesting question. So I think like one thing that's happening anyway without us doing anything is the polarization and craziness of just this fragmentation is basically getting so strong that kind of the story that I laid out at the beginning of my journey is becoming, I think, more and more widespread. I don't know. I bet many people listening to this will recognize themselves being in a similar situation. Perhaps they didn't connect the dots yet, that, you know, these family dinners used to be more fun. That actually connects to geopolitics.
That's a t-shirt, by the way.
What?
That's a t-shirt right there.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, it's a great t-shirt. But yeah, and actually that does connect to geopolitics, to GameB, to the military-industrial complex, like to a whole world. There's a whole universe out there that actually is completely integrated and interconnected into these sacred spaces by now. It wasn't like that many generations ago. Now it is. Now people spend more time and have more trust into, you know, that screen that they carry in their pocket than their own family members. It's sad, but this is the reality that we've come to. And yes, many people, like some people sometimes choose the route of, I'll double down. I rather want to be right than actually have, a heartfelt connection with important people in my life. And that can be course corrected at any time. Like there's no, there's no way, there's no place where it got too bad that you can never return. But I think the more painful that gets and the more isolated you feel, and the more often you try to fill that void with groupthink and just hashtags and flags and whatever, and it doesn't work, and you keep kind of getting there, that coupled with more and more people, let's say on the other side of that, with just a temporary difference, this is nothing is set in stone. It's just right now some people are on the other side of that choice, where it's like, no, I go closer to the people that are in my immediate surrounding, and I seek their perspective, and I want to understand that. So if you have more pain building up on one side, and then increasing maturity on the other side of people that completely look behind the ideology and just see the, connect to the heart, put the heart of the other person in your heart, and everything else is kind of secondary to that. The more pressure builds here, and the more this movement to the other side of that equation gets catalyzed. And so I think, the best reason, the best advertisement for GameB is actually Game A, just like the failures of it. So that's one piece. The other is, and that is from the early days of the foundational problem statement of GameB, is there are things that are explicitly valued in Game A. And we can talk about whether they should be valued, but they are explicitly valued. And that is, for example, breakthrough science, breakthrough healing methodologies, things like that. People get Nobel Prizes for that if they figure that out. And there are, almost all of academia is striving to be that in that small group of people that achieved something for humanity. It's interesting to look under the hood of this whole part of our society, especially now science and technology is just a very tangible thing, where and the reason why it's so valuable for this context is that you can speculate about the metaphysical structure of reality all day long, and actually your work fits in super nicely with this. There are all these maybes and these beautiful ways, and I love that. Like I love to marvel about what might be possible. Science allows you to take an insight and actually apply it to a technology that actually works. So if you figure out quantum computing in your garage and you break the blockchain with that, people will be like, what happened? Who are you? How did you do that? Right? So I'm not saying you should do that, but this is very strong feedback that something is going on there. And so basically, this kind of metaphor with the quantum sense making that I laid out earlier, which is just like quantum computing, has so much more horsepower behind it for the right type of problems, of course, but it has this exponential kind of edge over classical computing. In the same way, GameB will actually allow all of the cognition and the genius, just the brilliance that's out there. There's so many brilliant people in the human family, will allow that to actually become more than the sum of their parts, instead of this whole tragedy of peer review, I would say. That actually just like completely, all of that genius is just evaporating into heat, basically.
It's just like pissing competition instead of human progress.
Exactly. And and there's another rabbit hole I invite the audience to go down, like where peer review came from, what it does, what it is, and how brilliant people feel about it. But so the thing is, that spearhead of humanity that is kind of courageously saying, like, we have no clue where exactly we're going in the kind of in the like what form will it take. But we know the quality, we know the essence of it, we connect with it. Like the more beautiful world our hearts knows is possible, not our mind models, it's our heart knows. And that spearhead of humanity that is going there at some point will cross the threshold, certainly. And I think we're not far. And
so
then,
you're saying, so before you continue to the then, don't forget what you wanted to say, but just so I understand, you're saying that these can potentially be bridges between game A and game B, the things that are valued in game A, but they absolutely exist in their most mature, most beautiful form in game B, actually. Is that what you were saying?
yeah.
Okay,
So
continue.
I think everyone agrees right now it would be great to solve the energy crisis, which is just one tiny facet of the meta crisis, like the whole shit show that we're in right now. Or cure cancer, Alzheimer's, all of that stuff. Like there's no, everyone kind of agrees that would be great. And whoever, like that spearhead of humanity, once it will cross that threshold, and I'm seeking to explicitly contribute to that with the InterBrain, where we can actually put the right puzzle pieces together. For example, like however the cure of cancer looks like, it will be puzzle pieces that are already lying around, put together in a new and interesting way, more than the sum of their parts, and suddenly you have the thing that everyone is looking for. If you have a group of people that for some reason like has orders of magnitudes more of these breakthroughs happening, like just like that, everyone will be like, how do they do that, right? And then it's like, oh, it's easy. Here's the blueprint. Like we're completely transparent. We completely like this whole IP trade secret stuff. That's all game A nonsense. Like we don't do that. We're just people. We just want the best for everyone. Open source everything. And you can copy us. And actually, for example, a key thing that we don't do is we don't reduce reality to one perspective. We don't put ideology over actual authentic connection and all of that stuff. So, you do what you want, but this is how we came to cure cancer. This is how we solve the energy crisis or whatever. So I think that's a huge thing that we're not far away from that curve going vertical and getting a lot of attention. And there are many of these examples that.
Are you familiar with the work of Michael Levine?
No.
So he's on the verge of curing cancer exactly by reframing some of these ways that we're seeing everything. He basically discovered a way to interact with the electrical signal that seems to be holding information above the level of the DNA. So what he basically played with, which is something that apparently we already knew in genetics for quite a while, but it was never explicit in that way, which is that what knows the shape of your face is not your genes.
Right.
There's some other component here, and it was basically it is the dens. So there's this electrical signal, and he's not talking about it philosophically. They could isolate, identify, and utilize by literally sending commands or communicating with to that signal. And for example, they can see the shape of a face of a whatever animal they're studying before it forms, because they're looking at the bioelectrical signal that holds that information. And what they managed to do is, for example, they think of it in terms of like, if the DNA is your hardware, then this bioelectrical signal is your software. And what they managed to do is to basically take the software and put it in a different being. So they took, I forget, it was flagellum, or I don't remember what it was, but they took something that can regrow itself fully. So it has a software that knows how to do that. So previously, a lot of the thought was, well, it's some complex decision tree that just kind of knows itself. It just, yes, all the individual parts, they don't really know about what they're doing as a whole, but all they need to do is to do their little function and everything is going to be all right. So what Michael's saying, that is incorrect. There is literally a software level that actually knows that. So then what you can do, you can take that instead of reinventing, figuring out what all the genes and all the little, knobs and twists that you got to do in the frog's body in order to make that limb regrow. All you got to do is take that software that says regrow tissue to its full capacity, and they implanted it in certain frogs, and the frog regrew a limb, and the frog couldn't do that before. But notice that the other animal, if it would just be telling it to regrow whatever that animal has, that would not work. it just tells it to regrow it, period. So that's a much more universal function, and you put it in a different animal. So what he identified is that cancer cells seems to have a broken unitary bioelectrical signal. They think they're individuals. So what you got to do is that you got to remind them, you got to put it back into the thing and tell them, no, you're part of this thing. And then they stop becoming cancerous because they understand they have to function, which is literally what you're describing right now that we kind of have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
You have to look into it's incredible. Yeah, his work is incredible.
I heard about the guy that grew like another head on a lizard or something, so that must be the same researcher.
Well, Michael, maybe there's other people, but he's kind of like in the forefront of this study.
Right.
And so what I wanted to, to me, it always looked like that the whole idea of the zero-sum game is due to quite literally a very myopic view that we have that there is an end to the cake. So it's almost like because we're kind of doing this, we're like, oh, well, that's all I can see. So therefore, I got to protect this. But it's when you do this, when you understand, it's literally infinite. And the only way you're going to get to play in this infinity is if you actually do this and recognize, if we don't share, if we don't just care for the sake of doing the great thing, if we don't just do it for the sake of the feeling that comes with just doing the great thing and for no other reason, you'll never get there. Because in order to play there, you actually have to just open up and understand that we're not. It's not only that there is no end to the cake. It's not like this tiny piece of the cake. The cake is so large that we can't even imagine currently how we're going to get to play with the rest of the cake unless we open ourselves up to the potentials of just kind of like blooming, just opening up, just like getting up there and like seeing the potentials and the beauty that is unfathomable to a point of view that is constantly just looking down and kind of like in your little pie.
Right. Oh yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, this is crazy. Like, I don't know how many times I kind of returned to that metaphor and was like, damn, it works even better than I thought. So like early on, you're like, as above, so below. Okay, so cancer, GameB, that kind of, there's something there. And, the further you unpack it, like, oh my God, like it's the same fucking story.
It's teaching itself. Yeah. But a thing that I wanted to say before, and I forgot, but what I love about your story is that it's almost like a perfect version of identifying the fractal element of how reality works. Because you notice that whatever was happening to you personally in your family, in your immediate circle, was happening also to the world in a much larger scale. The same fragmentation. And identifying that it's literally the same thing, just on a larger scale executing, immediately makes you understand. If you fully grasp it, you say, like, if I change my immediate way I'm doing things, it will automatically tell me, or maybe even automatically fix how the greater thing is happening. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
100%. And an interesting point here is that whatever remains kind of scale invariant across these different layers is it's not the surface form. Obviously GameB, we drive around in cars and stuff like that, and a cancer is a mushy thing in a biological body. It's not the level that we're talking about, but it's like there are these what some people call second order simplicity or clarity. Like there are these deep patterns behind all of that complexity that you see, these organizing principles. And that's where you have as above, so below on that level. And and actually on that level, that's always for me, like, I'm never satisfied until I arrived at that point where I feel like, so you have this flow, you start with a simplistic view. That's might be, how I was growing up and seeing the world. You have this cartoon version of, we have the police and the firefighters and the politicians, and they're like, this is simplistic. This is not how it works. Then you get into the complex realm where you are like, okay, so the police is connected to that, and politicians are, they are lobbyists, and this is all of that stuff's going on. And this is an endless, like, this is like a hydra, like it just keeps on growing. But then you can go behind that and identify a very easily kind of graspable core essence that is actually rather simple again, but it can be unpacked to be useful across all of these different domains. And that is where that's exactly where this metaphor is such a perfect example for that. And I'm reminded that there are a few things that, let me try to pull them in here, because that's actually a really nice point here. So I heard Zach Stein. Are you familiar with Zach Stein?
I'm terrible with names, so unless I'm seeing him a lot, can you remind me what
right.
is?
So I just know him as a medical doctor that is incredibly wise, and he's connected with Charles Eisenstein. That's all I can say right now.
I gotta see his face. Keep going.
Yeah, but he's basically extremely juicy insights that he's sharing on that second order simplicity, or like that clarity level. And he said this once, like that, the type of mind that is taken for granted now, like the mental waters that we swim in, in the Western world, is not really able to understand what commons should be.
What should be? Sorry,
the commons. So land that belongs to itself, that's its own thing, that is not owned by anyone. You can care for it, but it's not yours. And nowadays, people are like, wait, so no one owns this land? What should that even mean? We're like, private property is like the language that we speak. And as Stein said, when the first Westerners, were coming over to North America, they kind of did that thing, like who owns this, who owns that, and you can
I'm not sure that's true. I think boundaries it's not even a human thing. I think it's a nature thing. I think it's just where you draw the boundaries and how rigidly you draw them. I think that part is correct. But I don't think it has anything to do with North America or the Western world. I'm pretty sure that territory is something that existed since humans existed.
Yeah.
Do you not agree with that?
Probably on some level I would, like bioregional territories, and there's a lot of nuance there. But just taking a very kind of simplistic version of that, where you arrive at an ecosystem, a bioregional region that is like so abundant, like if nature is not interfered with the way that we do it today at a mind-boggling rate, alone, just letting it alone just produces this incredible abundance. And we have the ability to be custodians for nature and actually make it like a garden even more rich. Like that's a potential what we could be. We're not really doing that right now. But what you can do in this incredibly rich ecosystem where everything is there in abundance, you can build a fence and say, this is mine. And suddenly you're in this tiny spot, this closed system, a system that's more closed than before.
So it's less about the territory itself, it's more about the attitude you carry towards it.
Yeah. It's more like that. That's more the level that I'm talking about. And then suddenly you're like, oh, cool, I still have apples. But basically now there's no water on my property. So now I need to buy it or go out and get it. And, suddenly you cut yourself off from this endless abundance that is available to you when you kind of surrender into the flow of giving and receiving. That's how some people would express it. But what ecology does, what nature does, it's just like giving and receiving in a self-organizing way that just, grows and grows and grows. Once you close any part off, it suddenly becomes entropic and decays into this finite pie where you have to defend your slice. And this is precisely what happens in a cancerous in a cancer. So it perceives itself as a separate thing, as you said, like I'm not part of this really. Mm-hmm. There's a deeper kind of almost psycho-spiritual dimension to this, where it's like, I'm alive. I know I'm alive, but I don't feel the aliveness anymore of my surrounding. So I'm not, I'm not resonating with that. Like I'm not in this same rhythm. So it's not, as you know, with like signals and antennas and stuff like that. Yeah, right. When we have different frequencies, it's as if we're kind of going past each other. So if you imagine you're a Cancer, there's actually a way to understand why the Cancer is doing what it's doing, because it's like, oh, I'm the only remnant of life. Like the stuff outside maybe looks a bit similar, but you don't feel the aliveness of it. And so actually it's a very honorable thing to be like, I need to proliferate. I need to spread. I need to grow because, I need, it's in my hands. If I die, life is gone kind of thing. Just on a very, subjective level of that. And I love the analogy with kind of how space exploration right now is kind of viewed through that simplistic materialist lens that we are the only remnant of consciousness in a dead universe. So we have this imperative to bring what only is here to the rest of the cosmos, or and completely overlooking how many indigenous cultures, like most if not all of them, kind of felt like no, the universe is alive, and there are interesting dimensions to that. Like there's more than just the material world, and the material world is also much more alive than we recognize, and all of that stuff. But that just
I wanna challenge that, if you don't mind. I'm not so sure that in the general spirit, but more about the specifics, and that's what I want to explore. So to me, it seems that even though it's clear to me that I'm much more of the idealistic perspective currently. So like to me, it's clear that everything is consciousness, not even that everything is conscious, but everything is consciousness. So to me, it's very clear that whatever the universe is just another representation of some grander universal mind of some sort. But it seems to me that like, I'm not really sure that analysis tracks for me. Like, I don't know if it's true that the reason that we want to explore space is because we're the only, sliver of consciousness. I think that's a thing we pay lip service to. I think it's a thing that when you're asked the question, that's the best rationalization your brain comes up with. But I think that's not the reason at all. I think it is a natural tendency of everything unbounded. So anything unbounded in space, forget about Earth, forget about the biosphere, which is absolutely true. And by the way, so like if lions could take over the world, they would do it they would do it immediately. They just don't know how, right? So it's not a human thing. It's just first of all a living thing. It's just like it spreads, right? And not necessarily a cancerous thing. It's just if it's unbounded, and the same holds for a pool. Like quite literally, like if you put a pool within a bound, it will be a pool, and then if you open the thing, it will stop being a pool and it will spill out. It just will spread. It's kind of like what the universe does, and in that sense, to me, that connection actually connects me more to nature, not less. So there are parts where I agree that it's a fun coincidence that what Michael Levine discovered kind of maps onto what we seem to be. Recognizing in ourselves the separateness, the feeling of the separateness. But as you even pointed out, we are quite different than a Cancer. We don't just multiply. We do a lot of other very complex things. We build things. We understand things. We are universal explainers and constructors that the Cancer is not. So I think that this is where I feel like we may be pushing the metaphor too far. And the reason I feel that is because what I'm identifying, so bear with me here because this is not a very well-defined thought yet, but I'm going to try and steer my way through it with you. One of the things that I'm identifying as one of these traps is the perception of ourselves as a disease. So this famous scene in the Matrix where Agent Smith goes,
yeah.
It's the stench, right? It's the smell, right? And it goes like you're a virus, and there's a moment there where you go like, wow, so true. Now you're trapped. Mm-hmm. It's not true. So we are just like everything else. we just exert a lot more power on our environment. The one thing in which we are unique, and I think that's a pretty objective claim, but we can talk about it, is that we managed to somehow develop tools that are so universal to this domain, which is our planet, that are pressing against the environment faster than it presses against our genes. So we kind of like start tilting the thing back. Now that creates a situation in which whatever allows for that function to evolve to this level also holds some deeper component of what you called choice, whatever this universal thing that is kind of choosing between A and B constantly, right? And it becomes a more multifaceted, multidimensional kind of thing versus, well, like you said, kind of like a superposition of a state from which a choice can emerge that is of a much higher level kind of a thing. It's no longer just like a multiply, don't multiply. It's more like there's a lot of, directions that previously nature could not imagine before things like us came on the scene. And this is not to put us on a pedestal. This is to recognize that there is a function there that is truly unique to this corner of existence. And I am certain that many more of those exist and way more advanced than what we are, for sure. But that should not prevent us from recognizing the fact that we are holding these keys. So it's almost like a lack of responsibility that I'm identifying, that sometimes when we push these metaphors too far, it becomes another version of okay, now I can sleep again. Because it kind of matches like but like the reality of it is no, it's still open-ended. And it's an example I think I gave you when we spoke off camera. With all our faults, of which there are many, we agree on that for sure. If another cataclysmic event happens, kind of like the one that is postulated to have wiped the dinosaurs, now there's a potential salvation for everything in the biosphere, and that's us. We can actually save everybody. So it's almost like we get we don't get a pass for everything. We still need to clean up our mess for sure. But there you go. But we do get to not treat ourselves as a vermin. Like when somebody, I'm sure that you already get the point, but I do want to drive it home. When somebody, I had this discussion with a good friend. He invited us for this event, and we were on the boat talking, and he very much second kind of like this, a lot of these elements of like the more hippie kind of like awakening, which by the way I love. But then he said that kind of stuff along those lines, and I said, well, look, if somebody comes to you and they really want advice of how to become better because they see that you're doing something that makes transformed person, and you identify in them, then they have a lot of this like negative talk about themselves. They're like, oh, I always do this. I'm such a piece of shit. They do stuff like that. That would be the first thing you would be correcting, right? You'd be like, I think you might want to stop doing that part, because that convinces you that you are this bad person and you kind of act accordingly. And I feel like it's not different as a civilization. Like the more we talk ourselves, no matter how tacitly, no matter how hinted at, but if it's there, that's a seed of seeing yourself as a problem. And I think that can sometimes derail the larger process. And the final thing I'll say on that, and I'll let you respond. It's more of to me, it's clear that whatever we are is just a possibility space that nature opened in this corner of the universe. And I think what nature would like is that possibility realizes itself. And I think that possibility cannot realize itself if it keeps locking itself in this is bad and we should steer away from that, versus we just kind of flow. And I know that you probably agree with most of it, but I just wanted to point it out there. And so first of all, do you see it as a legitimate slight course correction, or do you feel that I maybe misunderstood what you were saying on some level?
It was definitely a very helpful clarification, which I resonate 100% with. And that is I heard this once, I think Daniel Schmachtenberger said that on the Future Thinkers podcast. early on in me discovering the whole stuff, where a fetus growing in a womb right up to the point of birth looks, feels, behaves, has the same properties as a parasite, right? It's taking from the mother. And if you don't know what this is, this happens tragically, but there are women that get in situations where they have never learned what pregnancy is, and they're pregnant, and what's going on and stuff like that. This could be frightening, and right to the point of birth, which is the messiest point of it all. Then you realize, that's what has been actually happening. So I think right now this is one of the, if we can, provide this memetic medicine to the human family, that we are not a parasite, we are not a virus,
Yeah.
If you want to point out that we are taking a lot from the environment, I'd say, we're a fetus. We're about to be born. That is actually a much more beautiful way of looking at it, and a much more accurate way, I would say. But just as a nuance there, but I was explicitly comparing game A to a cancer. And I still stick with that. Sure. But it's not the same as saying we are a cancer or a parasite. It is just the pattern of our interactions, the story that we inhabit, is one that is fundamentally rooted in fear rather than love. And there's this incredibly deep rabbit hole there. And that gives rise to all of these things, these dynamics, again, highly complex, but at the root of it all, it is there's a type of mind that tells and inhabits a type of story that is rooted in fear, scarcity, zero-sum, competition. There's a whole host of things, and again, lots of nuance there, but just there's this general cluster that leads to us kind of behaving as if we were a cancer in some regards, which is not us. This is I would say game A, more and more how I view it, is basically it's just accumulated trauma. Like everything that separates game A from game B is trauma, I would say, like all the things that go wrong. And this is exactly what I would say to that hypothetical friend or person seeking advice. I would say, you are not your trauma. You're not your problems. You have trauma. You have problems. They will be gone once you integrate them, and you will never even think about them, because what you really are is so much more interesting and beautiful. There's no space left to hold on to this stuff. Let's just clear it out, and so you can be what you're meant to be. And so in that framing, it's like humanity is not a cancer, but you could say it has a cancer right now. A psychospiritual one that is somewhat parasitic, but we can fix it, or we can heal it. And then going while we're in that mode of game A, trying to go out in the cosmos will be more of will be the same playbook. Will be kind of a colonialization of space. Yeah,
our incentives towards everything would be misaligned with everything.
If we go out into space with the attitude that is at the heart of game A, it will be kind of just another colonializational project. It's the same old boring game, just on a larger scale. So I would say this is not something I'm excited about necessarily. What I would say, what the alternative to that looks like, that still includes going to space, is much more comparable to the idea that every human being is irreducibly unique. And so you have an irreducibly unique path that you're kind of unfolding into, and an irreducibly unique gift that you can give. And the same has to be true for humanity as a whole, right? And so I feel like, we have definitely a very interesting story to tell. We have learned very unique lessons that definitely no other potential civilization out there has learned in quite the same way. And so we have a unique gift that we can contribute to the kind of cosmic symphony. And that is something that I'm very excited about. And that is it's another one of those dualities that maps to the game A, game B, fear, love kind of thing, where it's about, game A is all about growth, economic growth and whatever, like growth in this idea of, or this boundary that we take for granted just get larger, that's kind of what growth means, like the country growth by taking territory and stuff like that. Indigenous people have, or explicitly the Aborigines have a concept called increase that is kind of the healthy alternative to that, because the cancer grows more and more until it kills you, right? Which is not even in the interest of the cancer. But your human brain, for the, like all the way throughout your lifetime, increases in its interconnectedness, when it's healthy and you keep on learning. And there's no end to that. Like the interconnectedness of your brain or of an ecosystem, of any system, can increase like without limit, basically. And that is actually something that is, an actively honorable thing to pursue. And this is what a species that doesn't perceive itself as owning the biosphere, Mother Earth, whatever, but rather being custodians of, aligns towards. We're not here to make the tree bigger and bigger and bigger until everything else is dead and there's just this one big tree. It's like we want this maximally interconnected, healthy environment. And they actually have meetings where the elders kind of, ask that question: how much have we increased this place? I think every year or so. So just like we have the annual report for how much the GDP has grown, they have a counterpart of that I find very beautiful. And going into, like, leaving the womb of Mother Earth with that attitude, I'm really excited about.
We couldn't agree more. I actually, it's funny because I use the word custodians exactly there. That's the perfect word. I use it quite a bit when I'm talking about this. It's clear to me that we can't be exporting the current attitudes into the universe. And at the same time, we have the responsibility of understanding what our strengths are and then utilizing them to actually protect the biosphere and make it even more beautiful. It's not outside of the realm what nature is doing. It's nature put us here to make it more beautiful than what natural processes can do, because we are also a natural process. It's just another iteration of that evolution, but we don't want it to become cancerous. And so I take that reframing, and it aligns much more with what I'm seeing as an image. I just always identify this kind of it's almost like we wake up in this, it's like a weird surreal movie in which people just wake up in a bus that is hurling somewhere. They're just kind of moving, and then everybody were asleep. And then everybody kind of slowly waking up, and they see a bus moving really fast, and they're like in this bus, and they don't understand anything. They just know the bus is going. And then people over time start arguing whether they should, try and drive the bus. But they're like, well, who are we? We don't know. Like, this seems to be like a natural process that is unfolding. So like, who are we to do anything? But then we're the only ones who can drive the bus. So it's like, somebody has to sit in front of the wheel, but at the same time, you kind of have to hold both of these views, that there is also a natural process that is unfolding. I like to kind of compare the human evolution to a person's evolution. Like the Stone Age would be just toddlers that just kind of crawl around, goo gaga, and hitting sticks. And I know nowadays it's a lot more common for people to think that even Stone Age people were a lot more sophisticated. Maybe some believe even more sophisticated than us. I would disagree, but that's okay. I'm sure some other people hold that view. The children's stage would be the agricultural revolution. Mine. I push you. Like, this is mine. This is yours. And then the teenage years would be more like the 20th century. Like, a lot of drugs, rock and roll, we do whatever we want, that kind of thing. We're going to run around, kill everybody, and, just like for the sake of all the stuff that we found valuable as little kids, and now we have more power, so we're going to try and utilize it to do that. And then I believe that we are now entering the stage of a young adult evolution, which is like we start to understand that, okay, I understand why I have to clean my room. Like, not because somebody told me, but I understand why. There's a structure there that is healthy. Like, there's something about that, right? I understand that I now have to kind of start thinking about what is the career I'm going to pick in the grander world, in the universe. What are we? Like, what do we want to be, right? As a unified collective. And then in that sense, I also believe it kind of removes the sting out of these like very binary, like, are we good? Are we bad? Well, we're powerful. So we need to steer ourselves a lot more appropriately than most things that can't exert that amount of power. And maybe there's even some kind of a limiter. Maybe the universe has a safety mechanism where it's just built into the system that unless you can align yourself in that way, you just don't get to play. Not because somebody's going to prevent you from playing, but because you, by the sheer fact that you couldn't align yourself, will prevent yourself from playing. That's basically the way that I see the grander picture. So that really aligns with me. And the last thing, I feel like this is something that Terence McKenna used to say, which is I never thought about it that way. It's very similar to the thing you said about the birth, but he added some details there. He said that if you look at a birth, first of all, if you walk into a birth during it happening and you don't know what's going on, just like you said, it looks like a serious emergency. From the perspective of the fetus, it's even worse because the fetus was protected in this beautiful, like everything was fine, like it was, and then all of a sudden it felt like the end of the world because everything is closing in. There's a lot of pressure. You're all of a sudden being pushed towards this like dark place where you don't know what it is, and you don't know what's on the other side, right? And then if you go all the way through, then there's a world out there that you can't even begin to fathom. From like trying to imagine what it's like to be I don't know, anything like a lawyer to a fetus, and like it's like it's like what are you even talking about? Breathing air? What is that? And in addition to that, which was a very interesting part of the analogy for me, the way that the fetus evolves, it recapitulates all the stages of evolution of life itself. So it starts from like just a single cell, double cell, then right? It's everything that life did, and eventually it becomes fish-like, and then it becomes pig-like, which is exactly what we were, like an evolutionary tree, and then it slowly evolves into like a primate, and then like a modern thing, and then more like a human. So it's almost like it has to recapitulate all the steps, kind of remind itself all the stages of evolution it went through before it goes through the birth canal. And the last thing he says, which is where I find the relevance to what we're talking about right now, which is that you do need to get out at a certain point. Otherwise, toxemia kicks in and it becomes toxic. So like, it might be the case that we're actually overstaying our welcome. So like we think of Earth as home. Yeah, but you leave home eventually. Like you can always come back, but like you were supposed to take flight. You're supposed to, and I know that nowadays I find a lot less people finding this idea alluring and beautiful. And I get it because they maybe want to be focused more on the practical things here and now. But to me, it's such a beautiful idea that, like you said, all the lessons that we learn here, we get to take it with us and gift the universe these beautiful things because of what we had to go through. Would you say, and this might be a little bit of an esoteric question, but would you say that this process of going through what we're going through, the way we went through it, in terms of the through the form, so I think just being form is traumatic already, aside from, as opposed to being a pure spirit that just experiences bliss all the time.
Yeah.
But so would you say that, if you have to guess, of course you don't know, but if you would have to guess, would you say that civilizations going through these stages is kind of the norm, or do you think we're uniquely kind of something went wrong in the way that we were evolving before we?
I do have probably quite a spicy answer to that. I think your audience is probably the right audience to just unpack that, but. From all my, that whole quantum sense making stuff we talked about, this liminal mind that is like, I don't know, but I care. I want to, I want to know, but I don't right now, and I own that. There's a process that I like to call the liminal flow, which is basically just you let everything in. Stories are not dangerous. Like, stop being afraid of stories. They're just stories. You don't need to do anything about that. You might feel, I'm going to be ostracized from my peer group if I even allow that thought in and stuff like that. And, you can start taking steps to find, transform your peer group or find a different one that this is not that much of a factor. But the more you're able to just let everything in, no matter how crazy or incompatible, that's actually what it is, incompatible with your current worldview. We call that crazy, right? So how matter how crazy that is, you just let it all in. And you collect the dots and you connect the dots. That's your job. It's beautifully simple. And these things actually self-organize. These dots will procreate, get children and stuff like that in this mental ecosystem that is your mind. This liminal flow, if you surrender into that, always building cylinders, etc., recursively, will get you very interesting places. And at least for me, relative to my starting point, the place that I discovered a few years ago was extremely exotic, because I grew up hyper-materialist, atheist, like militant atheist kind of mind. And and then healed from that. That's, for me at least, that's a valid way of expressing it. Like I allowed more things in, etc. And it was one of these things that could have never happened if there wasn't a person in my life, very dear friend of mine, that, his heart wasn't mine. And, he was opening me up to more exotic aspects of reality. And because I love him, I was curious about what he believes. And that otherwise I couldn't have made that jump. And so that led me to discover what I like to call like transcendental knowledge transfer, or like channeling in all its forms. I mean, what do you do with the DMT experiment? Of course, like, there are different ways to retrieve information. Even the way that you discovered it, this constellating these synchronistic data points, like, this is what I'm referring to. There's a way that is different than the scientific process of discovering information. And I would say, to this date, among the most extraordinary of these channelings that has occurred, because I had no idea how much channeling is happening on this planet, was what happened between 1981 and 83, I think, with a group of 3 people. Carla Ruckert, who was the instrument, like the medium, Don Elkins, the questioner, and then Jim McCarty, the scribe. Like, these 3 people, they stumbled into what now is referred to as the raw contact. And they had, like, Carla Ruckert in her early 20s, for some reason, no one taught her how to do it. She just had this ability to go into a trance state and make contact and like channel. And she had some channeling experience prior to this raw contact, but there was some jump happening where suddenly something extraordinary was happening. And so she was, she would go in that state, completely leave her body, also would have no memory at all of what happened. And while she was in that state and her body was unoccupied, I guess, something else was using her vocal cords to communicate. And everyone that finds that interesting, I invite you to find LL Research on YouTube. They have a YouTube channel. All 106 sessions that they did, which were recorded, the audio and the transcription, all is on YouTube. You can listen to how strange the voice sounds from that woman. But the reason that this is fascinating, I would say many people would agree that's kind of interesting and fascinating, but why should you take seriously what comes through necessarily? She might just be hallucinating or whatever. There's a switch that happens when you go from domesticated to liminal mind. When domesticated mind, you are so there is the it's called the transcendentals: truth, goodness, and beauty. It's been kind of key philosophical insight, especially in the West for a long time. Domesticated mind is, for some reason, takes truth as the most fundamental thing. And goodness and beauty are kind of like, side notes. It's nice to have, but, you want to know what is true. So truth, like if something being true and something being real is equated for domesticated mind. Liminal mind, I would say, embraces the holistic thing, where it's like, okay, truth, goodness, and beauty are just these aspects of story or knowledge. I don't know what the right thing is of which these things are aspects, but it's actually explicitly something from the eminent metaphysics that beauty is more fundamental than truth and goodness. So truth would be like the masculine aspect, and goodness more the feminine, more thought, more feeling. And beauty is kind of the grounding thing from which they kind of co-emerge in a sense.
And what is
all of this?
I'm going to ask a very GameB question though. What is the justification that is given for placing beauty as the ground, as the more fundamental thing?
Well, I heard someone I respect a lot say that. That's my justification. No, and then I validated.
Appeal to authority, noted.
No, I had suspicions. I was always thinking, how does it map? So with the immanent metaphysics, it's not the same. It has rigor, but it also has fluidity, which is grounded in that kind of Gödel horizon thing, like that there's a limit to formal systems, and the immanent there's a limit to how far a formal system can take you. The immanent metaphysics kind of starts from there and builds something that you could call a meta-formal system that actually holds this fluidity and the rigor both in one. But this means that you don't have the same thing as, a mathematical statement is true or false. It doesn't have this deterministic thing.
No. So I want to clarify. I'm not so much asking like in terms of like prove to me that beauty is the most fundamental. No, I mean more like, so I tend to differentiate. I'm reframing a little bit in my thinking the whole relationship between subjective and objective. Because I think people lose themselves in these categories and it's not useful. The way that I'm reframing it is that I think that subjective has to do with the direct experience of a thing. And objective is referring to what is actionable from that first person experience of a thing. But it's always subjective first. Like it's not, at no point is it not subjective. And this is something that I think you would agree many scientists lose themselves in, because they say, well, what do you mean? We can measure, there's an equation. I'm like, yeah, but no one has ever experienced an equation or an experiment without first having their first person experience of it, right? So it's almost like we converge on many, many subjective points that somehow they're actionable in the environment we find ourselves in. And that's the thing we call objective. But they're not competing with, they're not one or the other. The reason I'm outlining this is because the way I'm asking it is, so for example, for me, the instance of understanding of something that is true, it is beautiful. It is the most transcendent experience I personally, me, Danny, can imagine. It's just how I'm constructed. There's something that when you recognize something as true, not in terms of like it comports to what I already believed, but it's almost like nature looks back at you and winks at you and goes, yep, you got it. Like that instance is so beautiful because you saw nature, nature saw you, you saw that thing. It goes, that's exactly right. It works in such a way that is cathartic is the wrong word. To me, it's transcendent and it is beautiful. So I guess I'm asking about it's clear to me that this is just another frame in order to reframe what currently takes us in the quote unquote wrong direction. I'm fully aware of that and I'm all for it. I'm in full agreement. I guess what I was seeking more like, what is the initial intuition from which we started to end up with specifically beauty? Because that is a very interesting thing to me, because I would place I guess I would call it understanding, not so much the acquisition of knowledge, because that sounds like I'm hoarding, but like more the moments of connection with reality. To me, these are the fundamentals of experience. But to me, it's still clear that the best way to say it without running into category, rigidity with other people is there's still the state of affairs, right? So like there's the experience with, like, what if the nature behind everything is not what we recognize as beautiful, right? So it's like it's almost like, on the one hand, you want to say, yeah, but what is the relevance of this? But on the other hand, I'm always tempted to push forward with, well, the relevance of it is that I do believe that all evils ultimately are the result of insufficient knowledge or understanding. It's always some misunderstanding that leads you to an action that causes suffering because you don't align with what in fact is the state of affairs to which we belong. So even our perceptions of it are still part of the state of affairs, and in that, our perception of beauty would be as well. And I guess what I'm constantly trying to distill is these moments of connection with what the world really is doing, in addition to what you are doing as the world, that have this perfect alignment. Like they don't have a slant. They have like that is it. That is the moment where the universe winks back at you and says, yes, this is it. Because it rings true to me. So like what you said rings true to me. But I'm trying to see, is there a deeper, well, maybe deeper is one word. You see what I'm saying? Like what is that you started with to make that the thing? Yeah.
Yeah. So I just realized I have to make an important correction. Earlier I was asking if you know Zach Stein. Yeah, I think, but I was talking about Zach Bush. Very important.
Oh yes, Zach Bush. Yes, in fact, the same friend that I told you about when I told you about when I was telling him on the boat about the thing, he was raving about Zach Bush, and he, wait, you know him because we met. Umani was the friend, so we were talking with Umani. And he was talking about Zach Bush, and he's like, I want to bring him to my thing, and like he's gonna bring him to the event.
Yeah, okay. So Zach Bush was a brilliant medical doctor. Zach Stein is a brilliant thinker, also in that GameB movement, more focused on psychology and things like that. A different set of expertise. Both are brilliant, just to clarify that. And this just popped into my head because I heard Zach Bush say that at some point that what feels true to him or feels real to him is that beauty is actually the perception of coherence. And that, I found that very beautiful and it's very beautiful. Coherent, that statement.
Perfect.
So
perfect.
That is what, like, and maybe just to not spend too much time on this point, there's a video on my channel called The Custodian of the Noosphere where I kind of lay that out. But basically, I'll just run for it for now, just so I get to the raw contact stuff, because I would love to unpack that properly.
You nailed it for me. That's what I was looking for. That's perfect.
Okay, beautiful.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is the domesticated mind has what I would call the domesticated epistemology, which is like truth first, which also means kind of reality is a set of facts that don't care about your feelings. It's like a phrase that I found very salient the first time I heard it, and I used it as a weapon for some time until I kind of figured out there's something wrong with that statement. And so liminal mind actually has what I would say called a liminal epistemology, which is beauty first. And the interesting thing is the statement underlying the domesticated epistemology of like reality as a set of facts that doesn't care about your feelings is actually, in its own words, that is a fact that doesn't care about your feelings. So it kind of sucks to say that and to live in that, and that's the point. It's self-referential. And I would say that saying beauty is actually what measures the distance between you and kind of reality, absolute reality, is a very beautiful way of approaching it. And so it's, again, circular.
I love it. It's very impressive. I agree, and it tracks in all domains. When you do psychedelics, when you get into deep meditative states, things without a doubt are more beautiful.
Yes.
Because you probably get closer to what the thing really is. Yeah.
And I would say ultimate reality is just infinite beauty. Like that's for me, like seeking beauty is the second order simplicity. Like that's where like my choices, I just want to seek beauty, and I like to always align with the most beautiful. And I think that is stable as a civilization, to do that, to align with the facts, where everyone is fighting over and says to the other side, facts don't care about your feelings. That is not stable. But I was just saying all of this to kind of give a bit of an idea how someone that was as domesticated as myself kind of ended up in that place that I'm about to share here, because I gave kind of the facts, right, about, you know, who is involved, how long, how many sessions, all of that stuff. But the reason why I take seriously what came through is just this ridiculous amount of beauty that came through in that contact. It's a question answer format, but these answers that Ra is giving sometimes are like, this is truly like, you know, transcendent to anything I expected. And they are more channeled texts that for just that reason I take more seriously than what I learned at university and things like that. Yeah. And so the Ra contact basically transmit, among many things, Ra transmits a cosmology, a view of cosmos that is like, man, that's such a beautiful cylinder that puts together so many things. But basically the key is that reality is a fractal, big surprise, that is like but it's an octave fractal. So it's an infinite nesting of octaves within octaves within octaves, which maps to the chakras and stuff like that. And
just so I understand, what is the significance of saying that it's specifically an octave? Because a fractal already contains itself infinitely, so that's already a thing. What specifically in terms of vibration? So like it's a particular frequency that repeats itself among many levels. Is that the reason why you use the word octave?
Well, it has 8 aspects. Like it's 8 with an 8 with an 8. So that's why it's an octave.
Specifically, like, got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why it's that way, I don't know, but I find it very beautiful that music theory and the cosmic symphony actually maps. Like that just makes sense, you know. And in that, basically, the most relevant level of that fractal for us right now, because you asked the question, like, how would civilization be viewed in the big picture? Like, what are we? Like, what's the journey we're on and stuff like that? Ra would say, in that cosmology, would say, consciousness evolves through an octave. Ra refers to it as different densities, and of which, you know, for each level of the octave, there's a different density. So we start with first density, which are just this is just the density of existence, and that is where you have the elements. So I think it says something like wind and fire for like billions of years. Wind and fire teaches water and earth for how to become alive, or something like that. Like that's the first density. It's super long. It's just this primordial consciousness expressed in the elements. Second density starts with what we would call life forms and organisms, and it's like all the way from these tiny bacteria or the first proto-life, proto-cells and stuff like that, all the way up to our pets, you know, a cat, a dog, something like that. That's the second density of consciousness, the density of awareness. So we go from existence to awareness, and that's just where you learn, where consciousness teaches itself growth and movement. So that's you know, it's not just this ocean, like it's not just like the elements that are just smeared, like not really localized, but suddenly it becomes a thing that grows and moves, stuff like that. And then comes the third density, which we are in right now, at the very end of it, actually. And that density is the one where you go from awareness to self-awareness. And that's such a key, right? Like that's what you can point to, what is different about humans. Like we have a self-concept. And that density is highly unique in the entire octave according to that cosmology, because it's the density of choice. Because at that point, in the evolution of consciousness, any species needs to make a choice between which polarity they serve or they explore, or what role they will play in the cosmic symphony. And that is the choice between what Ra calls the negative or the positive polarity, which in its essence, I would say, is the negative polarity relates parasitically to free will or choice. So it tries to coerce, manipulate, things like that. And the positive polarity relates symbiotically with the choice and free will of others. That, I would say, is a super key aspect of it. And I would say it maps to fear versus love. So when you kind of stumble into the third density, you still carry that animalistic innocence of like you didn't consciously choose how you became, but more and more become self-aware. And now you have to decide. Basically, now you start to ask really important questions about, what are we? Why are we here? What is this for? And there is just a journey that is available where you that consists of integrating trauma, healing trauma, and just becoming more and more crystallized. That's what Ra refers to it. Where you polarize more positively, become ever more loving, like closer and closer to the embodiment of perfect love on an individual level, but also on a societal and civilizational level. And this whole thing that we started this conversation with these two pathological attractors versus the third attractor, you can basically flip the whole thing on its side, and now you basically have the two pathological attractors. There's not really that interesting of a differentiation between them, in my view. Like, I find it equally uninteresting to blow ourselves up as to perpetually be stuck in like a technocratic hell. Like, I'm just equally disinterested about that. And this is the negative path, chaos and control kind of escalating each other. On the other side, you have the positive path, that's the third attractor, where all paradoxes resolve through integrity, like things integrate and all these problems vanish. And and basically, and this is extremely concrete, and I'd love to just get more people interested in this stuff so we can really like check out all of the implications and details, because I'm just one person. Like I haven't compared it to all the available data that we have and stuff. But Ra talks about that there's what ancient Greeks would call the great year, 25,000 something years that it takes for the Earth axis to kind of rotate. I think it's about the precession. Yeah. And according to Ra, third density, I think in general or on planet Earth, I'm not sure, is 3 of these cycles. It literally, so 75,000 years is kind of what they say this journey, this particular chapter of this story that we are living in kind of played out. And we were born into the time where that thing closes, and now we have a hard fork coming up where things either get really dark and perpetually so, and we play kind of the Sith Lord side of things, the Empire, or we actually become a civilization, and we become more like the Jedi, I guess. Whatever metaphor you want to use, but that to me is just makes so much sense, and everyone should just see how much that resonates. But I feel like when you say, are we an accident or are we meant to be here?
No, more like, is the process we went through is kind of a steering away from the normal process, or most civilizations go through all these dark times, and that's part of the...
Right.
Yeah.
So these oscillations that I was talking about between these pathological attractors and also this oscillation between darker times and brighter times, I think that's always the case. That's just life, and part of this choice process that we're not conscious of until we are, right? So that I think that's normal. But actually, yeah, and there is also no right and wrong even in that framework. It's just like, let's make a conscious choice. And so it's normal that at some point a civilization, and exponential technology is key to that, has to make a choice. And that right now, that means, will we actually address the meta crisis, grow to meet the challenge and transcend all of this stuff? Or will we completely devolve into that darkness? And both choices are valid, but paradoxically or ironically, I would say only choosing the positive polarity is one that we will consciously recognize as a conscious choice. Where I think the negative path is kind of the unconscious choice of just choosing fear, reacting, panicking on an escalatory path as a species until we panic ourselves into that mess, basically.
Yeah.
So
I want to. So thank you so much for clarifying this. I want to ask you about this concept that you have of dream weaving and the amplification of the right signals. So one of the things, I'll just give it a very short summation, and you can expand on that. One of the things you're talking about in the video is that basically the second the newest technologies came along, which is just the mass amplification of the signal, we basically became addicted to the amplification itself. So just kind of like you just press a button. Well, it's there, therefore I'll amplify it. So you get a zoo of information based on nothing else but how good is it at amplifying itself, which, by the way, is all that genes do too. So like genes just try to replicate themselves, right? But in the end of the day, there's like higher order processes that are riding on top of and are also informing back propagation the process that is giving rise to them. So it's a two-way street. So what we basically are doing, and this is why social media looks the way it is. Well, that's already my extrapolation. You didn't say it in the video, but I'm assuming that's what you meant. We just kind of amplify whatever is amplifiable, right? So the news networks just want more clicks. They don't care about the truth statements of everything is an opinion piece now, right? But you were talking about that there's this new potential of creating a network that will only amplify things that are inspiring. Now, this obviously becomes a little hairy when you try to ask yourself, like, but what if one thing that is inspiring to one person, is it inspiring to another person? But I think that what your deeper point is that, well, there is the universal inspiration. It is the song that the universe sings. So can we amplify only the signals that make that thing sing in us, and we create a network that suppresses, by the definition of what it is, suppresses signals or just doesn't amplify signals that don't sing that universal inspiration? So I wanted to ask you about, first of all, please feel free to flesh out more where you feel that I may be misunderstood or misstated. But what I would like to explore with you is, did you ever think about the specifics of how this can be done? Like, what is the mechanism, what is the mechanics there, that like of how we create that network? What does it look? What is it about that network that that makes it by default only amplify these more universal inspirations?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the essence of how you kind of recapitulated it is on point. Just to give that a bit more substance, so basically it connects to this whole cylinder metaphor once again. You will see that everywhere in my work, like this is the foundational switch between the domesticated and the liminal mind. Is actually recognizing that reality is transperspectival, meaning it can never be fully captured in any given perspective. So let's not fight over perspectives. Let's not try to find the absolute perspective, because this is like a non sequitur. But nevertheless, you don't have to fall into this kind of epistemic nihilism of, okay, we can't make sense of it anyway, so let's do nothing kind of thing. But rather what you can do is define the kind of meta pattern, like what relationship between perspectives will lead us further along, like closer to reality, and which will drive us away. And that is the whole thing about conflict between perspective, like which one is right. And I would say social media is like a big shit show about people trying to win just by being louder than the other one, which leads, it's like a civilizational epilepsy, basically. Like, and we have things keep going viral. Everyone tries to be a mind virus, basically. And that's like a seizure for humanity, literally. And so that doesn't really have a beautiful future. The alternative is to look at, okay, rather than winning between perspectives, how do they fit together? And this can actually be instantiated quite tangibly in the software that I'm working on. Literally just using the Git protocol on top of which GitHub is built, this open source protocol, without doing anything else, basically just saying, let's use it for all types of knowledge, like for the whole class of knowledge, not just software. The system is built for software, but essays, books, articles, everything can also be tracked with that and integrated, and that's the key piece. So people that are not in the software world, that won't be obvious to them. But if you open up a new app, let's say the Discord, for example, I don't know the details, but very likely they did not build video call functionality completely from scratch. They probably took something that already existed, a puzzle piece that was lying around, and then they imported it as a submodule into their project. And so software is just this perfect example of this liminal flow. People exploring stuff and then building bigger pieces out of that, and then bigger pieces out of that, etc. That we can plug into for all of knowledge, basically. And so, basically, it was pretty clear to me from the outset that any solution to this problem, this kind of signal noise problem that we have, that we tend to hear almost only noise when we just blindly walk into, any social media platform, contemporary social media platform. If you're not careful about it, you basically drown in noise. But you want to find the signal. The only problem is there's no one you can go to that tells you this is noise and this is signal. And this whole thing, like GameB is addicted to authority. That's a problem we need to overcome. So how do we build a system that steers towards signal if we cannot ask any authority what it is? Like, we don't have the data, right? We don't know. We care about the signal, but we don't know what is the signal and what is noise. And so basically what we can say is what Ken Wilber put nicely in his work, saying like more perspectives, more truth. Oh, now it's funny again, like more real. Let's say it's like, let's use that language. And so the idea of the InterBrain is basically whatever you have to say, or whatever unit of knowledge is meaningful to you. That might be a book, that might be a birthday present that you're working on for a friend, like some collage or something like that. It can be anything, or a musical sample, whatever it is. You encapsulate it in what I call a dream node in that system, which is a Git repository, but a bit more. But it's basically almost identical to what's already out there with open source software. And then you basically build more and more a digital twin of all of the knowledge that you care about, that you carry with you in your interior. And you also create representations of the people you care about. So this will be very different from contemporary social media, where you kind of pump up that number and have more and more followers, more friends, whatever. There it's actually like 10 people, 15 people. That's already great, and maybe you don't even want more than that. You build representations of the people that you actually kind of want to, on a more or less regular basis, talk to in a video call. So it's a very different subset of people that you would put in that system.
You recreate the tribe inside of the cyberspace, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So what you do is you start connecting the knowledge units, the dream nodes that hold knowledge, to the dream nodes that represent people, in such a way that basically if I would create a dream node for you, Danny, I could select it in the InterBrain, and I would see kind of around, that's all like little circles. I'm working on that right now, like the UI, you can check that out. But so I click on Danny and I see all of the knowledge that we share, and that would include, for example, like your discovery, the DMT experiment, any representation of that. So this could be everything that relates to that you can throw into that Git repository and just have, this is this thing. And then whatever else is there that connects us, the stuff we talked about in this conversation. And so for every person, you start to see what are the stories that actually mediate our relationship or my relationship to this person. But then you can click on any story and it switches. And now you see the story in the center and all of the people that you share that story with around it. And so that would be a memetic tribe. There's a meme, a thought form, and then all of the people. But it's not the bird's eye view of the memetic tribe. You only see the subset of that memetic tribe that you personally know. So that tribe could be millions of people strong, but if you only have 5 friends that you talk to about this stuff, you only see 5 people. And I think that's a feature, not a bug, that you don't know how big these things are, because that doesn't add any value, really, in my opinion. Like, it just kind of gets you into these weird ways of thinking of like, oh, more people think that's why it's true, like, which is not actually how it works. But what you then can do is basically in your own time, in real time, in a conversation, whatever, like whenever, you can take 2 or more of these dream nodes that represent knowledge, and you can integrate them just the way how you might take a video chat module and a text chat module and put them together to build Discord or something like that. In the same way, using the same infrastructure, you can use these knowledge repositories and import them into a higher order cylinder repository, and then explain how they fit together. How are these 2 things actually more than the sum of their parts in some larger context? And when you do that, you basically send out a signal, which I call it like the coherence beacon. You can trigger the coherence beacon. And so you're like, oh, I think I found some coherence here between 2 previously disconnected or even conflicting points of view. And but that's just a claim, and there is no authority, right? So all you can do is offer that, and you will offer that to all the people, or to the entire subset of the memetic tribe that you are in direct connection to. So all your friends that hold this, hold 1 or more of the input nodes, will be notified that you did something new and interesting. You built some bigger thing out of what they already hold. And that, so basically, just to make it super clear here, you have like a circle node and a square node, just abstractly speaking, and there are 2 different memetic tribes in your set of peers. And maybe some of them don't even like each other because they think these are in conflict, but then you put them together and say, it's actually a cylinder, guys. And you just offer that as like memetic medicine. You're healing that divide, offering that to each tribe, and they can just see if it resonates. If it's beautiful and coherent, it will resonate. So if it does, they say, oh, hell yeah, let me take that. And so they will join a new higher order kind of meta tribe. And so that's where, people can meet new people that have different views, but in a context where it's like, oh, we complement each other. There's some larger story here that connects us. But then the recursion of that process is the key, because now when they accept it, there's no difference between creating a synthesis, like building a cylinder yourself, or receiving one and accepting it. It's the same thing in that software. It's just every time you accept it or create it, you extend it. So you're also not.
Oh, that's how the getting better the more you share it becomes a thing.
Exactly.
Because it gains notoriety, it gains the recognition that it is coherent by the network.
Yeah, through a highly mysterious kind of phenomena of inspiration, I would say. It's probably inspiring if and you know, some things might be trivial and that's totally fine, but other things might blow your mind, right? Like you never would have thought about it that way, but it makes perfect sense and you're like dying to share it with more people. So in that system, you would accept that. But if it's kind of like very incoherent or potentially even a bad actor that tries to infiltrate the space and tries to see division, sow division, and which is difficult in this system because you would need to combine stuff in a way that brings people apart. But let's say someone tries some creative stuff, it would probably just not resonate that much. And in this system, it's much more intimate and direct. So while on, you know, X or Instagram or whatever, you might kind of willy-nilly share something and you're not really sure if it's signal or noise, but it's okay. Like you just put it out there. People don't really have to look at it and stuff. In this system, it has the same level of gravity as talking to someone around the campfire and actually bringing up a topic. And so you wouldn't want to pollute the mind of your friend with noise when, and so
what
in that
creates,
system basically.
What creates that equivalence between, like, because when we're sitting around the campfire, it's the physical proximity that implies physical touch that ultimately sets the boundaries. Mm-hmm. What sets the boundaries in the network?
Well, so the piece that I didn't mention yet is that the primary way of stories flowing through the collective in the InterBrain is in the video call, i.e. digital campfire.
Okay.
So what we're doing right now, that's actually the core of it. It would just be augmented by, you know, I referenced the DMT discovery, and I would, so not at the same time, I would share a Git repository, and you can clone that, and so the story would be transmitted both through the verbal, but also the kind of digital counterpart to that, the digital twin of the story that I'm sharing would flow across the same edge. So that's a primary thing, and that already self-corrects so many things that are broken with social media, because we just return to the original technology of free-flowing conversation around the campfire. And then on the other level, the way I was kind of trying to say that is more like, just as an example, like if you jump on a Discord server that has like 1 million people there and almost everyone is anonymous, like some of these NFT crazy servers or something like that, people are just posting spam all the time, scammers everywhere, because you don't care. Like, who is that? Like, I don't know you guys. You might all be bots. So let me just, you know, pump some noise into the space, versus you have a family chat on WhatsApp or something like that with just like 5 people. And if you would start to sell some pyramid schemes in that space, it would be kind of weird. Like you wouldn't do that, right? Because you care about these people. And so there's just a natural thing that happens when you switch the attitude of what social media is from breadth in terms of like how many people can I reach, you know, how loud can my voice become, to depth, like how intimate can my connections be with this set of people here. And if it grows, it grows. It's beautiful, but it doesn't have to. Like I can spend the rest of my life with my core close-knit community, and I'm fulfilled. And I think we can build digital systems that allow that.
I think it's really beautiful, because ultimately the level of evolution is just not how much power you can exert, but how well can you frame yourself within the system that exists. So, for example, you can exert a lot of power, you can do a lot of things that make big explosions, right? But the question of where you should apply these explosions on the one hand, if you want to melt some ice caps in a planet you're trying to terraform, that's one thing. When you're doing it to to blow other people up, that's a whole other thing. And knowing where the bounds, like we have to go far to find where the line is. It's funny because when I was calibrating the mic, right, you do the auto, and what it does, it goes to the maximum thing, it finds it, and it goes, that's where it is. So now I know what the healthy portion in relationship to the max is. So I feel like what we were doing, we're kind of pushing the envelope to see where the red is. But the wisdom is now, okay, now that we have knowledge of where the red is, we gain wisdom as to where the central point of stability and harmony is. And then how do we stay there? And I think like a mature civilization, the one that starts to understand what it really is starting to go back to that central point of harmony, and it acts from there. It's not trying to constantly amplify the signal to the red, because everybody knows what the red is and what the consequences are. It just kind of goes back to a healthy, that's a really great example where if you have people that don't care about they don't place value on how many people follow them, because it's a kind of like this fake, it's an illusion of importance that doesn't really exist, because most people just kind of scroll. Even like even from like celebrities, like very often, or people that I follow that are like thought leaders, very often if I'm in a hurry or whatever, I'm just doing my doom scrolling sometimes, I would just go through it, and like I see somebody by someone I like, I won't even listen to it. I would just like it because I follow them and I want to give them a like, right?
Right.
But I didn't get anything out of that interaction. They have an illusion that a bunch of people liked it. Probably a bunch of them were just kind of like clicking. So there was no actual meaningful interaction that happened here. And what you're saying is that in this new kind of way of doing it, it doesn't matter how many people I'm interacting with or following me. Even if for the rest of my life I'm just going to spend the time with these 5 or 7 people, I will feel good inside. I'll feel fulfilled, and they would feel the same, and we would resonate together. And over time, this signal will be the one that is actually exported into the universe, the one that is enthralled by what is possible versus anticipate a reciprocation. And those are very different modalities. I find it very, very beautiful.
Growth versus increase again.
Growth versus increase, yeah. Amazing. In the surface of becoming aware of, we're getting at the 2.5 hour bench. Well, we actually went past minutes. Well, no, I can keep doing this for a long time. So in maybe in closing, I want to ask you about what is it that so you said you're working on the software to bring some of these things about. How do you view the transition from the testing version of it to like exporting it? Like, what does that moment looks like to you? Is it like a big launch? Is it like slowly kind of moving? Because everything you said is exactly what we were looking for. I think Carter told you shortly in what we were trying to build. Like, we were building this thing called Veilbreak AI, and we're not. This is an attempt to just create something that is actually open source, that is we're going to be utilizing for what we need. But just like you said, in the service of borrowing great things that other people have already made or working on, what I wanted to what Veilbreak AI is designed to eventually deliver is that when people coming into the project, they always have a lot of questions about what so far has been done. Is like, did you try this? Did you try this? And then every time, invariably, we have to kind of like recapitulate everything, right? But Veilbreak AI would be able to just kind of tell you, like, well, this is the repository of everything that already exists. If you want to contribute, this is the kinds of things you can do to actually contribute, and then just go from there. So it basically automates the onboarding to understanding and also the project. But I love what you're doing a lot more, of course, because it also includes this element of inspiration. It also helps people, guides them, which eventually there was a thought behind this whole thing that maybe it can actually help people discover more of what they wanted, even if they didn't think about it. So, for example, somebody might come in and they're like, hey, I'm a software engineer and I've been one for 20 years. I'm really good at it. I can do this, 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 and this. But maybe with their interaction with the AI, they would actually understand that what they really wanted to always do was do some research in physics. But they never thought about that. Like, they just they just kind of landed in this really cushiony position that paid them a lot of money, and they're like, well, that's a great life, and I get to be technical. But they never really thought that there's this another thing there that actually makes their soul sing a lot more. And if they can discover it through interacting with Veilbreak AI, that will be very empowering, you know. But what your project seems to include is also the organic element. It's not just the fact that it helps people kind of discover this thing, but it also helps and find their clicks that are a lot closer to what they really want to be and how they want to be in this world. But also it creates an organic process that cannot inspect itself. In other words, it lends itself to this infinite unfolding into a space that even the universe doesn't know the outcome of, which is the ultimate surprise, right? Which by the way, that's how I think reality is unfolding. I think the universe is unfolding into an infinite space that it itself cannot see, and it's designed this way on purpose, so it's not boring, right? Because if all infinity exists at once and it can perceive itself at once, it's like, well, let's go home then. Like, well, what's the point of this, right? So the evolution part it seems to be baked into what you're working on. So because it's so ambitious, and because the specifics of it, I'm sure it's not that easy to work on, but you're taking it with stride. How do you view these first steps of adoption? Just kind of like, you know, just like you would imagine any other software being adopted, just kind of like, you know, make it available and see how many people want to participate in it? Or do you view, maybe campaign is the wrong word because it's definitely GameB kind of term, but but what is that thing? Is there any other amplifying elements that we can add to it that might help it grow in the beginning? Did you ever think about that?
A bit, yeah. I definitely know what I don't want to do in that regard, and you kind of put it well. Like I'm not intending to run a marketing campaign or anything like that. Let's see. So, I mean, there are different levels that I can answer this. Maybe I just kind of go through a bunch of them, but you know, on a kind of surface level, I'm building it right now as the InterBrain is an Obsidian plugin, and the naming is related to Obsidian being called the second brain. So the InterBrain will allow you to connect all of these second brains that people have out there into one interconnected InterBrain. And so, yeah. I don't have the intention to interfere with that organic process of people just resonating in case it actually is valuable and then adopting it. But it will be, you know, it will be just one click inside of Obsidian. You can just add it as a plugin. It's kind of plug and play in that sense. That's what I'm aiming for. And yeah, let me not fully go there because there's a more meaningful part of answering this. And that is, there's a quote I love from Ilya Prigogine, kind of one of the foundational thinkers that led to complexity theory and chaos theory and all of that stuff, which says, in a chaotic system, small islands of coherence can shift the entire system, something like that. And so that's what I get really excited about, because right now I'm kind of building the instrument, and I've been thinking about this instrument for a long time, but the memetic backlog of music that I want to perform with this instrument, which means sharing inspiring visions through that medium, which then actually inspire a culture to so inspire, like the vision incarnates its spirit. It inspires a culture, which then conspires. So it kind of breathes together as one. It becomes bigger to come up with a strategy to make that happen. All of the stuff that we talked about, like, it's only valuable if we can really make that dream come true. Like, it needs to somehow, the rubber needs to meet the road somehow. And I think, especially with this absolute insanity that is emerging right now with AI agents and just, you know, the exponential curve of AI, a small group, like a group that doesn't need to be large, can completely make miracles happen. And so a slogan that I like to that occurred to me that I might want to use here is miracles over marketing. So basically, I love, as an example, one of my favorite miracles so far that has played out in the last few years was the GameStop miracle. I have a whole video about that called The Age of Miracles. But basically, there was no marketing campaign to make that subreddit Wall Street Bets famous. They became famous. I don't know how many people were there before, but now millions of people are on that subreddit. They became famous because they did something that no one expected they could do. And that was, tangibly, they saved the company from their youth that many of them had like some emotional bonding with. And they made a $12 billion heavy hedge fund go bankrupt, which is, also impressive. But it's more meaningful that they saved GameStop, I would say. But basically, that happened despite all of the issues with Reddit. But it feels to me like there's an evolution in consciousness and culture that made this happen, even though there are all of these different problems with, a centralized message board, voting messages up and down, like all of this signal noise ratio. It's a miracle, quite literally, that this could happen, and that there was enough of a capacity to filter signal from noise in that completely emergent, kind of crazy type of subculture. And a big part actually was because this is such a weird subculture and the language is so unique. The bots or employees of these, hedge funds that were trying to save their ass were actually completely sticking out in that subreddit, and completely, it was so easy to spot them because they didn't speak that strange language that people speak there, which I loved. But that was happening on Reddit, and so the instrument was completely out of tune with the type of music that this culture was inspired to play. And a big thing happened anyway. So if we now have an instrument that is precisely from the ground up designed to basically be immune against manipulation and kind of narrative warfare and stuff like that, propaganda, and be finely tuned to only upregulate inspiration. And, we kind of talked a bit about that, how that would look like. That instrument could just, everything staying the same, just switching out the instrument for that phenomena. I don't know how, where it would have gone. But I think it would have become even more beautiful. It would have probably increased more dramatically in the wisdom than the power that was present there as well, but both would go up. And basically, I don't want people to use that system just, I don't know, because someone said so, or everyone is talking about it or something like that, not that marketing stuff. I want them to, I don't know, a friend calls them and say, have you heard what happened? This is a miracle. We never knew that this was possible, whatever it is. And by the way, they kind of used that software for that. And then you might be interested to try it yourself. That's what I want to see. I don't want this to become big if it's not doing what it's intending to do. But yeah, I'm also not I'm open to it scaling far beyond that small island of coherence if it just turns out that way. And I think there's one of the things it also is it's an off-ramp from social media addiction, which is something I'm not really struggling that much with because I kind of never opted into social media to begin with. But yeah, I don't know, there are people out there I can imagine that are struggling with that. And roughly what I think what will be possible with that system is you can find just a group of few people, just a few people in your surrounding, and you all might be, I would love to do less doom scrolling. Like it's not good for my mental health. We all know it, but we're all doing it. I have yet to meet someone that I tell that I never started with social media who doesn't say like, "Oh, good for you. I wish I would have done the same." Like
mine is actually pretty like mine is like more, that's my TV. So like I very consciously allocate about 30-40 minutes in which I just literally doom scroll for the kick of it, and I just jump off it. Like I know that okay, that's my time. So I found like a nice middle ground. But definitely if there's something that's a little bit more inspiring, it can really help. And by the way, I want to say that if the universal song is real, then the miracles would happen quite often if you amplify that song. Yeah. That's your connection to reality. So like if you think that it's real, you test it. The way you test it is you run it. And if it does all of a sudden take flight in a way that even things with marketing didn't, it shows you that there's something very fundamental there that is operating behind the scenes. And this is why I really love the idea of you talking about being less of a mechanic and more of a gardener. I think you used a different word, but like learn how to plant the seeds with the natural processes that already exist, because then you become part of that unfolding that is happening versus just a constant tweaking that we're trying to do to everything because we're afraid it's going to go wrong or in the wrong direction of what we wanted it to go.
Exactly. So and just to finish that social media addiction off-ramp thing, like what I learned, for me, that is something that was helpful is like, everyone has their addictions in some way, some, more subtle or more tangible. But for me, what I learned over time is trying to just get rid of the addiction without placing something else in its place is a very self-destructive thing that produces a lot of guilt. And for me, at least, I found I'm more addicted to the guilt than the thing. So that's a whole other rabbit hole there. But the basically going cold turkey away from social media addiction when that was your entire life so far, like every hour you anxiously reach for your phone to fill that, you need some alternative, right? You need something to replace that. And I think finding just a handful of people, maybe even only one person in your life that is also sick of this disconnected way of connecting, like the superficial way of connecting, just finding them and say, hey, why don't we have video calls regularly, and just fill that time with that type of screen time, because screen time itself, is not a negative necessarily. I really enjoyed the last 3 hours and this is screen time. And and if we then also get the news, not just because we talk to each other, but we actually share these posts, these dream notes with each other, we I think we can start to build a new basis and kind of like supply the needs that we were trying to fill with that doom scrolling, which never really scratched that itch. And yeah, so that's another thing where I could see that this would, be more on the scaling side of things, where, lots like a mass exodus from these toxic platforms towards something more healthy, starting with friends that, and they wouldn't post about it. You don't try to get lots of clicks saying, telling everyone now I'm leaving this platform, going there. It's just like someone you trust and like, let's do this together. We actually want to have some healthier lifestyle in that regard, take care of ourselves. That would be another type of miracle. That we should
deliver the news to one another. We should just put blazers on. Here's the news from my neighborhood.
Right. You could do that. Yeah. Sure.
That's wonderful, man. I can't wait to see where this grows and how it unfolds. This is such a beautiful and inspiring project that you're working on, man. I'm excited to find out where our collaboration will arise naturally from the whole unfolding. It's so clear to me that it will. We just let it kind of happen. It might be even directly around what you're working on, because it's a tool that everybody, but we can definitely utilize right now for inspiration and bring people more into the know and kind of make them part of what is happening. And I think there's something very profound about going deeper versus wider. And I think your tools deliver that exactly and aim there. There was something I wanted to tell you about the more of the one-on-one conversation. I forget, I'm spacing on it right now. It's the more of the meaning. So what I wanted to say is that, and I think we're not really saying anything different. I think we're just saying it in a different way. I don't know if it's necessarily replacing the addiction. To me, it's more understanding what was the root cause of constantly wanting to do only that one thing. And when you get to that root cause, and I think the root cause is always ultimately lack of meaning. Meaning is this very elusive substance, because what do you mean by meaning, right? But I think meaning is the substance from which we connect to what in fact is and wants to grow through us. So it's almost like it's a substance. It's some kind of a thing. It's not just the meaning we place on things. It is some kind of it's a fabric of some sort.
Yeah, it's not a cold abstraction. It's a real substance.
It's a real substance, exactly. Yeah. And that's what, because ultimately, good sex, good food, good interactions, all of it behind it, what your soul is after is meaning. It's the substance of it. If you just get to the physical act of physical interaction with people, it become like there's an excitement about it, which is the meaning, but then it just kind of and it just dies out because you never connected truly. It wasn't as meaningful. There was not that much meaning coming through. When you just kind of shove a bunch of food into your mouth, okay, there's a momentary meaning, but then there's the culinary experience, right? Of like the aroma, the paying attention to all the different textures and the dimensions of food, and it's a lot more meaningful, and you're a lot more mindful at the same time. So there's a lot more meaning there. And I think actually what psychedelics do, for example, they are basically a meaning aperture. They open the aperture of meaning. You perceive more of what the thing really is. I had this insight during an ayahuasca ceremony. I was looking at this red cloth, and obviously I've had a lot of psychedelics experiences before, so it wasn't new to me, but it was redder. But then in that instance, all of a sudden it hit me like, wait a second, what is more here? Because I know there's no more light coming in, so why is it? And it's not exactly that it's just brighter. Some people would say it's just brighter. I don't know. There's something more here that I can't quite put my finger on it. And then it hit me. I was like, I'm perceiving more of what red really is. Like what red is in its essence. That's what I'm perceiving more of. That's why it's redder. And that's
what it means.
What it means, the redness of it, right? And that's what you perceive also in other people. That's why everything is so interconnected, because it is. Because you look at the person, you see them in a completely different light. It's not just different, it's more of what they really are. You perceive more of that. Trees, all of a sudden you say, oh, trees breathe. Yeah, they do. You just now perceiving it. So that's the thing. You're connecting more to what it really is. And in that sense, if you can just, the reason for all addictions is the lack of being able to connect to the essence, to the meaning of what things are. So the second you open that channel, everything else feels like it's just a secondary thing. You can't possibly experience a bigger bliss than actually connecting to what things really are versus your ideas of what they are. Mm-hmm. And I find the one of the biggest triumphs that your work can deliver is allow people to actually learn how to reconnect again to themselves, to the world, to other people, and that's what will David, bro, it makes me so happy that someone as young as yourself thinking along these lines on this depth and executing on it. I can't wait to see what you come up with more. Before we jump off, please tell people where can they find them, where can they find you and your work, and how they can connect to you potentially, and is there anything that the world can bring that can support your project? Right.
So my main kind of outlet is my YouTube channel called Project Liminality, and there I kind of upload animated video essays, dream songs, if you like. So yeah, that's the core of what I'm doing. In terms of more the software development side of things, I have an open collective page that you will see all these things are like interlinked. So if you find one, you will find all the others. But that's where I post regular updates on the development process for the InterBrain, which I'm only in the very grateful and luxurious position to work on full time right now, because I started a crowdfunding campaign a few months ago that was successful, I'm happy to say. Yet ongoing support will enable me to kind of open-endedly keep working on that full time. So if financial support is something that is possible for anyone here that wants to see that thing come into the world, that's definitely right now the most helpful direct way to contribute. But yeah, there are other ways like email or something like that if people are interested.
We'll put all the links. I'll put all the links that you want to be shared. What is the crowdfunding campaign? Is this still on?
Yeah, so it wasn't the thing that ended. Like Open Collective works more like Patreon. So I kind of framed it as it was a crowdfunding campaign, but I just said, okay, this is the goal. This is when it ends. But actually, it's just an ongoing kind of Patreon type model. And Great. Yeah, the more of a basis I have there, the less I need to worry about these GameA things and can work on bringing GameB into the world. So that's highly appreciated.
David Rugg, helping bring civilization to level 1, brother. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed this, Danny.